When a blizzard trapped a CEO and her employee in a mountain cabin with only one bed, neither expected the storm outside would be nothing compared to what happened inside. What started as a simple corporate retreat in the Cascade Mountains turned into a night that would change two lives forever. Ethan Cole, a struggling single father, never imagined he'd be sharing a cabin and a bed with Charlotte Whitaker, the untouchable CEO of his company. But when survival meant breaking every professional boundary, they discovered something neither had felt in years, a connection that couldn't be ignored. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. The Seattle skyline disappeared behind thick clouds as the company shuttle wound its way up the narrow mountain road. Ethan Cole sat in the third row, his fingers drumming absently against his knee while he stared out the frosted window. The Cascade Mountains loomed ahead, their peaks already buried under a blanket of fresh snow that had started falling an hour earlier. He shouldn't be here. His daughter Emma was spending the weekend with his sister back in the city, and while he trusted Sarah completely, leaving Emma always felt wrong. She was 7 now, bright-eyed and curious, and every moment away from her felt like time stolen from the only thing in his life that truly mattered. But missing the company retreat wasn't an option, not when he was already walking a tightrope at work, trying to prove himself worthy of the promotion he desperately needed. "Jesus, it's really coming down," muttered Travis from the seat beside him, pressing his face against the window. "Think they'll cancel this whole thing?" "Doubt it," Ethan replied, though part of him hoped they would. They've been planning this retreat for months. The shuttle lurched slightly as it navigated a sharp turn, and several employees gasped. Ethan's hand instinctively shot out to brace himself against the seat in front of him. Through the gap between headrests, he caught a glimpse of the front of the bus. That's when he saw her. Charlotte Whitaker sat in the second row, her posture impeccable despite the rough road, her attention focused on a tablet in her lap. Even from this distance, Ethan could see the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the way she absorbed information with the intensity of someone who never stopped working. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a casual sweater that somehow still looked expensive, professional, without trying. She was the CEO of Cascade Construction and Development, the woman who had built the company from a small family business into one of Seattle's most respected firms. Everyone knew her reputation: brilliant, demanding, and completely untouchable. In the 3 years Ethan had worked there, he'd probably spoken to her directly. Maybe 5 times. Always brief exchanges about project deadlines or budget approvals. She existed in a different world, one of boardrooms and executive decisions, while Ethan lived in the trenches of project management, juggling subcontractors and trying to keep construction sites running on time and under budget. "She's something else, isn't she?" Travis said quietly, following Ethan's gaze. "My buddy in accounting says she works 16-hour days, never takes vacations. All business, all the time." Ethan didn't respond. There was something almost sad about that description, though he couldn't quite explain why. Maybe it was because he understood what it meant to build your whole life around work, to let everything else fade into the background until you forgot what it felt like to just live. The shuttle driver's voice crackled over the intercom. "Folks, we're about 20 minutes from the lodge. Weather's getting worse, but we should make it before the worst of the storm hits. Sit tight." 20 minutes turned into 40. The snow intensified, transforming from gentle flakes into a blinding wall of white that reduced visibility to almost nothing. The shuttle slowed to a crawl, and Ethan could feel the tension building among the passengers. Conversations died out. People stopped looking at their phones and started watching the windows nervously. "This is bad," someone whispered from the back. The shuttle fishtailed slightly, and several people gasped. The driver cursed under his breath, loud enough for everyone to hear. Charlotte finally looked up from her tablet. Ethan watched as she made her way to the front of the bus, moving with calm purpose despite the vehicle's unsteady motion. She leaned down to speak quietly with the driver, and even from where he sat, Ethan could see the concern in her expression. After a moment, she straightened and addressed the bus. "Listen up, everyone." Her voice cut through the nervous chatter with natural authority. "The storm's moving faster than predicted. We're not going to make it to the main lodge." A ripple of anxiety spread through the employees. "But," Charlotte continued, raising her hand slightly to quiet them, "there's an emergency shelter station about 2 miles ahead. The driver knows the location. We're going to stop there and wait out the worst of it. Everyone stays calm, stays together, and we'll be fine." The way she said it, direct, confident, without a trace of panic, somehow made it easier to believe. Ethan found himself nodding along with the others, even as his mind raced with thoughts of Emma. Would his sister keep her through the weekend if he got stranded? Would Emma be scared when he didn't call at bedtime like he always did? The shelter station materialized through the snow like a ghost town, a cluster of small wooden cabins arranged in a semicircle around a larger central building. The shuttle lurched to a stop, and immediately the company's head of HR, a efficient woman named Margaret, stood up with a clipboard. "All right, people, let's move quickly and stay organized," Margaret announced. "The main building has supplies and heat. We'll get everyone assigned to cabins. Grab your bags and let's go." The cold hit Ethan like a physical blow the moment he stepped off the bus. The wind screamed through the trees, driving snow into his face hard enough to sting. He pulled his jacket tighter and grabbed his duffel bag, joining the line of employees shuffling toward the main building. Inside, the central lodge was rustic but functional. A large open room with a stone fireplace already crackling with warmth, wooden benches, and shelves stocked with emergency supplies. Someone had turned on the overhead lights, casting everything in a warm yellow glow that felt like salvation after the brutal wind outside. Margaret had commandeered a table near the entrance and was organizing cabin assignments with military precision. "We've got 8 cabins, most sleep 4 to 6. We'll double up where needed. Single rooms are limited." Ethan waited in line, stamping his feet to restore circulation, while employees were dispatched to various cabins in groups. He watched Charlotte speaking with Margaret, their heads bent together over the cabin manifest. Even in crisis mode, she was composed, methodical. The line moved slowly. By the time Ethan reached the front, Margaret was frowning at her clipboard. "Name?" "Ethan Cole." She scanned the list, then looked up at the remaining keys hanging on the board behind her. Her frown deepened. "We've got a situation. We're 1 cabin short. More people came than RSVP'd. She glanced over Ethan's shoulder at the handful of remaining employees, then back at her list. "Okay, you're going to cabin 7. She handed him a key, and Ethan turned to go, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Cole, wait." Margaret exchanged a glance with Charlotte, who had moved closer. "Cabin 7 is... It's one of the smaller units, just so you know." "That's fine," Ethan said, too cold and tired to care about cabin size. He trudged back out into the storm, following the rough map Margaret had sketched. The cabins were spread out, connected by paths that were rapidly disappearing under fresh snow. Numbers were painted on wooden plaques beside each door. He passed cabin 3, cabin 5, and finally found 7 at the far end of the semicircle. The cabin was dark. Ethan fumbled with the key, fingers numb, and finally got the door open. He stumbled inside and immediately searched for a light switch. The overhead light flickered on, revealing a space that was indeed small. One main room with a kitchenette in the corner, a bathroom door to the left, a fireplace with wood already stacked beside it, and... Ethan stopped. One bed. Not a bedroom with one bed. Just a bed, positioned against the far wall with a thick quilt folded at its foot. A single nightstand. One reading lamp. The cabin was clearly designed for couples, not corporate retreats. "Great," he muttered, dropping his bag by the door. "Just perfect." Well, he'd slept in worse places. During his early days in construction, he'd grabbed naps in his truck between shifts. One night on a couch wouldn't kill him. He glanced around and realized there wasn't even a couch. Just 2 wooden chairs at a small table near the kitchenette. The floor it was, then. He'd pile up some blankets and make it work. Ethan was working on getting the fire started when he heard footsteps on the porch outside. He assumed it was someone checking on him, making sure everyone had made it to their cabins safely. The door opened. Charlotte Whitaker stepped inside, shaking snow from her hair, a small overnight bag in her hand. She looked up, saw Ethan crouched by the fireplace, and froze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm in cabin 7, Charlotte said finally, her voice carefully neutral. She held up an identical key. Ethan slowly stood, understanding dawning with uncomfortable clarity. "So am I." Charlotte's eyes swept the room, taking in the single bed, the complete absence of any sleeping alternative. Her expression remained professional, but Ethan caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "I'll go back and sort this out with Margaret," she said, already turning toward the door. "Some Ms. Whitaker," Ethan started. "Charlotte," she corrected automatically, then seemed to catch herself. In this situation, I think we can drop the formalities. The storm's getting worse, Ethan said, gesturing toward the window where snow was now pelting the glass with increasing violence. And they're probably still trying to get everyone else settled. I can sleep on the floor, it's not a problem. Charlotte studied him for a moment, and Ethan was struck by how different she looked outside the context of the office. Smaller, somehow, though she was still tall for a woman. More human. The CEO armor wasn't quite so impenetrable when she was standing in a tiny cabin in the middle of a blizzard, looking as uncertain as he felt. That's not acceptable, she said finally. I'll take the floor. With respect, that's not happening either. You'd freeze. Then we'll trade off. You take the first shift on the bed, I'll take the second. Before Ethan could argue, a tremendous gust of wind slammed against the cabin, rattling the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging them into darkness, broken only by the weak glow from the fireplace Ethan had just started. Charlotte pulled out her phone, using its flashlight to navigate to the table. Power's out. That settles it. I'm going back to the main lodge to see what other arrangements can be made. In this? Ethan moved to the window. He could barely see 3 feet beyond the glass. The storm had transformed into a full whiteout, the kind of blizzard that could kill someone in minutes if they got disoriented. You won't make it 20 feet. None of the cabins even have porch lights now. He could see her weighing the options, that sharp mind running through probabilities and risks. Finally, she set her bag down with a quiet sigh. This is highly irregular, she said. Yeah, Ethan agreed. It really is. The silence stretched between them, awkward and charged with the weight of their situation. Ethan turned back to the fireplace, feeding it larger pieces of wood, coaxing the flames higher. The warmth was growing at least. That was something. Charlotte moved to the kitchenette, opening cabinets with practiced efficiency. There's coffee, canned soup, some crackers. She paused. When was the last time you ate? Breakfast, I think. You? Same. She pulled out a pot and 2 cans of soup, chicken noodle, the kind that came in red and white cans and tasted like childhood. Ethan watched her work, surprised by how naturally she moved in the small kitchen. He'd somehow imagined that CEOs didn't cook their own food, that they lived in a world of catered meals and personal assistants. I can do that, he offered. I've got it. Charlotte's tone was polite but firm. You focus on the fire. If the power doesn't come back, that's going to be our only heat source. They worked in companionable silence, the storm raging outside while the cabin gradually transformed from freezing to merely cold to almost comfortable. The fire built to a strong blaze, crackling and popping, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Charlotte heated the soup on a camping stove she'd found in one of the cabinets, and soon the smell filled the small space. Bowls are above the sink, she said. Ethan retrieved them, simple ceramic bowls with a pine tree design, and Charlotte ladled soup into each. They sat at the small table, the only sound the howling wind and the steady crackle of fire. This is surreal, Charlotte said after a moment, a hint of dry humor in her voice. This morning I was reviewing Q4 projections. Now I'm eating canned soup in a cabin with one of my project managers while a blizzard tries to bury us. Could be worse, Ethan said. Could be cream of mushroom instead of chicken noodle. She actually laughed. A real laugh, not the polite chuckle he'd heard her use in meetings. It changed her whole face, made her look younger, less guarded. Fair point, she said. Though I'll admit my standards for acceptable dining have dropped considerably in the last hour. They ate slowly, and Ethan found himself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. Charlotte asked about his role at the company, and he told her about his current project, a mixed-use development in Capitol Hill that was running into zoning issues. The Meridian building, Charlotte said immediately. I saw your latest report. The neighborhood association is pushing back on the height variance. You read my reports? I read everything that crosses my desk. The Meridian's important. It's our first major project in that neighborhood. Getting it right matters. She took another spoonful of soup. Your solution to the parking problem was clever, shifting to underground automated systems instead of traditional garage space. Ethan felt an unexpected warmth at the compliment. It was the only way to make the numbers work without sacrificing the street-level retail space. Good instinct. That street-level activation is what's going to make or break community acceptance. They talked about work for a while longer, and Ethan was struck by how different this felt from their usual interactions. In the office, conversations with Charlotte were efficient, transactional. She asked questions. He provided answers. Decisions were made. Here, in the firelight, it felt more like a genuine exchange between equals, who both cared deeply about what they were building. Eventually, the conversation drifted. Charlotte asked about Seattle, how long he'd lived there, what had drawn him to construction. Ethan found himself talking about his early days in the industry, working his way up from job sites to project management, learning the business from the ground up. What he didn't mention was Emma. Not yet. That felt too personal, too intimate for whatever this strange evening was becoming. The fire burned lower. Charlotte stood to add more wood, moving with the same efficiency she brought to everything. Ethan watched the flames reflect in her eyes and wondered what she was thinking, if she found this situation as disorienting as he did. "I should let you know," Charlotte said as she settled back into her chair. "I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Building fires. You seem to be doing fine." "At—" She gestured vaguely. "Casual conversation. Downtime. My assistant jokes that I don't know how to turn off work mode." "Is that why you're at a corporate retreat on a weekend?" Ethan asked gently. "Because you can't turn it off." Charlotte's smile was rueful. "Something like that, though in my defense, I did tell Margaret this retreat was unnecessary. Forced fun is still forced." "Agreed. I'd rather be home." "Do you live in the city?" "Ballard. Small apartment, but it's close to work." He paused, then decided to trust her with the truth. "And it's got a good elementary school nearby for my daughter." Charlotte's expression shifted. Surprise, followed by something that might have been understanding. "You have a daughter?" "Emma. She's 7. Saying her name made his chest tight with missing her. "She's spending the weekend with my sister." "Is your wife back in Seattle too?" "No wife," Ethan said simply. "Just me and Emma." He didn't elaborate, and Charlotte had the grace not to push. Instead, she said quietly, "That must be difficult, balancing everything. Some days more than others, but she's—" Ethan found himself smiling despite the ache of being away from her. "She's everything. Makes all the hard parts worth it." Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her empty soup bowl. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, less guarded. "I admire that. Building a life around something that matters beyond quarterly earnings and market share." "You built an entire company," Ethan pointed out. "That's not nothing." "No," she agreed. "But it's not the same as building a family. A real life." She stood abruptly, as if uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "It's getting late. We should figure out sleeping arrangements." The awkwardness came crashing back. Ethan looked at the bed, a full size, maybe a queen, with its thick quilt and 2 pillows, and then at the hardwood floor. "I meant what I said earlier," he told her. "I'll take the floor. I've slept in worse places." "And I meant what I said too. You'd freeze. This cabin's insulation isn't great, and once that fire dies down—" She shook her head. "We're both adults. We can share the bed like adults." Ethan's heart kicked up despite himself. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that hypothermia is a real risk if either of us spends the night on the floor. I'm sure that we're both professionals who can handle an uncomfortable situation with maturity." Charlotte moved to her overnight bag, pulling out what looked like thermal pajamas. "I'll change in the bathroom. You can have the room." She disappeared, and Ethan was left standing there, trying to process what was happening. This was his CEO, the woman who signed his paychecks, the most powerful person in his professional world, and in about 5 minutes, they were going to share a bed. He changed quickly, pulling on sweatpants and a thermal shirt, hyper-aware of every sound from the bathroom. When Charlotte emerged, she'd traded her casual sweater and jeans for navy blue thermal pajamas that were somehow both practical and— Ethan forced himself to look away. "I'll take the left side," Charlotte said, her tone brisk and businesslike, as if announcing a seating arrangement at a board meeting. "Right side's fine with me." They approached the bed like it might bite. Charlotte pulled back the quilt while Ethan added 2 more logs to the fire, drawing out the moment. Finally, there was no more delaying. He crossed to the right side of the bed and sat down, keeping as close to the edge as physically possible. Charlotte did the same on her side. They lay down in the darkness, a careful gap of space between them, both rigidly staying on their respective sides. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. The fire crackled. Neither of them moved. "This isn't weird at all," Ethan said after a few minutes of suffocating silence. Charlotte laughed, that real laugh again, surprised out of her. Not even a little bit. The tension broke slightly, not completely, but enough that Ethan could breathe a little easier. "Thank you for being professional about this," Charlotte said quietly. "I know it's strange." "You too. And for what it's worth, the soup was good. High praise for Campbell's chicken noodle." They fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt less oppressive. Ethan stared at the ceiling, watching shadows from the fireplace dance across the wooden beams. He was exhausted, but sleep felt impossible. Every nerve in his body was aware of Charlotte's presence beside him, the sound of her breathing, the warmth radiating from her side of the bed. "Can I ask you something?" Charlotte's voice came through the darkness. "Sure." "Do you like what you do? The work, I mean. Or is it just a job to pay the bills?" Ethan considered the question. "Both, I guess. I like building things, solving problems. There's something satisfying about taking a project from blueprints to reality." He paused. "But yeah, it's also about Emma, making sure she has everything she needs." "What happened with her mother, if you don't mind me asking?" "She left when Emma was 2. Said motherhood wasn't what she expected, wasn't what she wanted." The old pain was duller now, worn smooth by years, but still there. Packed her bags one morning and never looked back. No custody fight, no visitation requests. Just gone. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We're better off, honestly. Emma deserves people who choose to be in her life, not someone who's going to resent her." Ethan shifted slightly. "What about you? Do you like what you do?" Charlotte was quiet for so long he thought maybe she'd fallen asleep. Then, "I love it. The company, the work, the challenge of it all. Building something that matters, that creates jobs and changes neighborhoods and leaves a mark." Another pause. "But sometimes I wonder if I love it because I genuinely do, or because it's the only thing I've allowed myself to have." The vulnerability in her voice startled him. This wasn't the CEO speaking. This was just Charlotte lying in the dark, admitting something she probably rarely said aloud. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked gently. "I took over the company when I was 28. My father built it, and when he died suddenly, everyone assumed it would fold or get sold off. Instead, I stepped in." She shifted, and Ethan could feel the movement through the mattress. "But to do that, to prove I could handle it, I had to become someone else. Someone harder, more focused. I couldn't afford to be young or uncertain or human, really. So I wasn't." "That sounds lonely." "It is." The admission was barely a whisper, but lonely was the price of success. "I made peace with that a long time ago." Ethan turned his head slightly, trying to make out her features in the darkness. "Did you, though? Make peace with it?" Silence. Then a soft exhale that might have been a laugh or a sigh. "No," Charlotte said finally. "No, I don't think I did." The wind shifted outside, and a draft somehow found its way into the cabin despite the fire. Ethan felt goosebumps rise on his arms, felt Charlotte shift as the cold reached her too. "Temperature's dropping," he observed. "The fire's dying." Neither of them moved to fix it. Neither of them wanted to leave the bed and lose what little warmth they had. Gradually, unconsciously, the gap between them narrowed. Ethan wasn't sure who moved first, maybe both of them, drawn by simple survival instinct toward shared warmth. But slowly, incrementally, the space disappeared. Charlotte's shoulder brushed his arm. Neither pulled away. "This is practical," Charlotte murmured, though Ethan couldn't tell if she was trying to convince him or herself. "Body heat, basic survival." "Absolutely," Ethan agreed. "Purely practical." Her hand found his under the quilt, fingers cold. He wrapped his palm around hers without thinking, sharing warmth. Such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental, the CEO of his company, holding his hand in the darkness. "Tell me about Emma," Charlotte said quietly. "What's she like?" So Ethan did. He told her about Emma's obsession with dinosaurs, how she could name every species in the Natural History Museum, about her laugh, which was too loud and completely infectious, about the way she insisted on wearing mismatched socks because matching is boring, Dad. about bedtime stories and scraped knees and parent-teacher conferences where he was always the only father in a room full of mothers. Charlotte listened without interrupting, her thumb tracing small circles on the back of his hand, an absent gesture she probably didn't even realize she was making. "She sounds wonderful," Charlotte said when he finished. "You're lucky to have her." "I know." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "What about you? Did you ever want kids?" "I don't know," Charlotte admitted. "I never let myself think about it seriously. Building the company took everything I had. And then years passed, and suddenly I was 35, then 40, and it felt like that ship had sailed." She paused. "Sometimes I wonder, though, what that parallel life might have looked like. It's not too late." "Maybe not, but it would require becoming a different person, someone who could make space for a life outside of work. I'm not sure I know how to do that anymore." "Maybe you just need the right reason to try." Charlotte turned toward him then, and in the dim glow from the dying fire, Ethan could see her face, open, unguarded in a way he'd never seen before. No CEO armor, no professional distance, just a woman who'd spent years being strong and was tired of it. "Maybe," she whispered. The space between them disappeared completely. Ethan wasn't sure which of them moved first, but suddenly Charlotte was in his arms, her head tucked against his chest, her cold feet tangled with his under the quilt. It wasn't sexual. It was something deeper, more fundamental. Two people who'd been alone for too long, finding unexpected comfort in each other. "This is probably inappropriate," Charlotte murmured against his shirt. "Probably. We should maintain professional boundaries." "We should." Neither of them moved apart. Ethan's hand found its way to her hair, fingers threading through the dark strands that had fallen from her ponytail. Charlotte's arm wrapped around his waist, holding on like he was an anchor in a storm, which, he supposed, he was. "I don't do this," Charlotte said quietly. "I don't let people see me like this. Vulnerable. Your secret's safe with me." "Why does this feel so natural? We barely know each other." Ethan thought about that. Maybe because we're both tired of being strong all the time. Maybe because sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, even if it doesn't make sense. Charlotte lifted her head slightly, enough to look at him. In the firelight, her eyes were impossibly dark, searching his face for something. "What are we doing, Ethan?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But it doesn't feel wrong, does it?" "No." Her voice was soft, wondering. "It doesn't." She settled back against his chest, and Ethan held her, listening to the storm rage outside while warmth bloomed between them. This woman who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions was curled against him like she belonged there, like this was the most natural thing in the world. Hours passed. The fire died to embers. The temperature dropped further, but wrapped together under the thick quilt, they stayed warm. Ethan felt Charlotte's breathing slow and deepen as sleep finally claimed her, but he stayed awake a while longer, his mind racing. Tomorrow, they'd have to go back to reality. Back to Seattle, to the office, to the clear hierarchy that defined their professional relationship. This night would become an anomaly, a strange story they'd probably never speak of again. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered. Right now, there was just the warmth of another person, the quiet comfort of not being alone, and the surprising rightness of holding Charlotte Whitaker while the mountain tried to bury them under snow. Ethan finally let his eyes close, Charlotte's steady heartbeat against his chest, lulling him towards sleep. The storm howled on, but inside the cabin, everything was still. Ethan woke to pale gray light filtering through the cabin windows and the unfamiliar weight of another person in his arms. For a disoriented moment, he couldn't remember where he was or why Charlotte Whitaker's head was resting on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. Then memory flooded back. The storm, the cabin, the impossibility of the night before. Charlotte was still asleep, her face peaceful in a way he'd never seen during waking hours. The sharp edges that defined her in the office had softened completely, leaving someone who looked younger, almost fragile. Her hand was still curled against his chest, fingers twisted in the fabric of his shirt like she'd been holding on even in sleep. Ethan didn't move. He knew the moment she woke up, this strange intimacy would shatter. The walls would come back up. The professional distance would reassert itself, and they'd both pretend this hadn't happened. So he stayed still, memorizing the moment, knowing it couldn't last. Outside, the wind had finally died. Through the frost-covered window, Ethan could see brilliant white stretching in every direction, the world transformed into something pristine and untouched. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt almost sacred. Charlotte stirred against him, a small sound escaping her throat as consciousness returned. Ethan felt the exact moment awareness hit her. Her body went rigid, her breathing changed, and slowly, carefully, she pulled back to look at him. "Good morning," Ethan said quietly, trying to keep his voice neutral, giving her an out if she needed one. Charlotte's eyes searched his face, and he watched a dozen different emotions flicker across her features. Surprise, embarrassment, something that might have been regret, and underneath it all something warmer that she quickly tried to bury. "Good morning." She sat up slowly, putting distance between them, one hand smoothing her hair back from her face. "The storm stopped." "Looks like it." They both knew what that meant. The storm stopping meant rescue, meant returning to the main lodge, meant the end of whatever this strange bubble had been. Charlotte swung her legs out of bed, her movements precise and controlled, every inch the CEO again. "I should check in with Margaret," she said, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. Her finger swiped across the dark screen several times before she frowned. "Dead battery. Yours?" Ethan checked his own phone. "Same. The power must still be out if nothing charged overnight." Charlotte stood, wrapping her arms around herself against the morning chill. The fire had died completely, leaving the cabin cold enough that their breath misted in the air. "I'll get dressed and head to the main lodge, see what the situation is." "Charlotte, wait." She paused at the bathroom door, not quite looking at him. "About last night," Ethan started, then stopped, unsure what he was even trying to say. That it had meant something? That he wanted it to mean something? That he was terrified it would mean nothing? "Last night was," Charlotte's voice was careful, measured, "an unusual circumstance. We both did what we needed to survive the cold, that's all." The words hit harder than Ethan expected, even though he'd known she'd say something like that. Even though it was probably the smart thing, the professional thing, to pretend those hours in the darkness had been purely practical. "Right," he said. "Of course." Charlotte's expression flickered, just for a second, with something that looked like disappointment, or maybe relief. Then it was gone, replaced by cool composure. "I'll be back shortly with an update on when we can leave." She disappeared into the bathroom, and Ethan heard water running, the sounds of someone putting themselves back together. He dressed quickly, building up the fire more out of a need to do something with his hands than any real hope of getting warm before they left. 20 minutes later, Charlotte emerged fully dressed, her hair pulled back in its usual ponytail, looking every inch the CEO who'd stepped onto that shuttle yesterday. If Ethan hadn't spent the night holding her, hadn't heard her confess her loneliness in the dark, he might have believed she was the same untouchable woman from the office. But he had held her, he had heard her, and now he was supposed to forget it. "I'll be back soon," Charlotte said, pulling on her jacket. She still wasn't quite meeting his eyes. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and Ethan was alone with the growing fire and the uncomfortable feeling that something important had just slipped through his fingers. He moved to the window, watching Charlotte's figure grow smaller as she trudged through the deep snow toward the main lodge. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, sending weak rays across the pristine white landscape. It should have been beautiful, but all Ethan could think about was Emma, and whether his sister had explained to her why Daddy couldn't call, and how Charlotte's hand had felt in his last night. His phone buzzed suddenly, one bar of signal appearing, then disappearing. Not enough to make a call, but he managed to send a quick text to his sister before the service vanished again. "Storm passed. Should be home today. Tell Emma I love her." The response came through in fragments over the next few minutes. "She's fine. Having fun. Don't worry." Ethan pocketed the phone and paced the small cabin, restless energy building with nowhere to go. Last night had felt like stepping outside of real life, like the storm had created a space where normal rules didn't apply. But morning had arrived with brutal clarity. He was still just a project manager. Charlotte was still his CEO, and whatever had happened between them couldn't continue in the real world. Could it? The question gnawed at him. He thought about the way she'd looked at him in the firelight, the vulnerability in her voice when she'd admitted her loneliness. That hadn't been fake. Whatever else last night had been, it had been real. But real didn't mean possible. Ethan was still wrestling with these thoughts when the cabin door opened and Charlotte stepped back inside, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "The main road's being cleared now," she announced, brushing snow from her jacket. "They're estimating we can get the shuttle moving in about 3 hours. Everyone's gathering at the main lodge for breakfast." "Okay." Ethan grabbed his own jacket. "I'll pack up and head over." "Ethan." He turned. Charlotte was standing very still, her hand on the back of one of the wooden chairs, her knuckles white with tension. "What I said earlier," she began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "About last night being just about survival. That wasn't entirely true." Ethan's heart kicked up. "No?" "No." Charlotte looked at him directly for the first time that morning, and the guard she'd put up cracked slightly. "It meant something to me. I just don't know what to do with that." "Neither do I," Ethan admitted. They stood there, the morning light streaming between them, both clearly wanting to say more, but neither knowing how. Finally, Charlotte shook her head slightly. "We should go. People will wonder where we are." The walk to the main lodge was quiet, their boots crunching through snow that came up to their knees in places. Other employees were emerging from cabins, looking tired but cheerful, already swapping stories about the storm. Ethan and Charlotte maintained a careful distance from each other, two professionals who happened to be walking in the same direction. Inside the main lodge, the scene was controlled chaos. Someone had gotten the generator working, so there was coffee and heat and people charging their phones at every available outlet. Margaret was organizing breakfast. Apparently the emergency supplies included industrial quantities of oatmeal and instant coffee, while other employees clustered in groups sharing their experiences from the night before. "Cole! Whitaker!" Travis waved them over to where he was sitting with a few other project managers. "How'd you guys fare? We had 6 people crammed into a cabin meant for 4. Pretty sure I'm going to have Jenkins's elbow imprinted on my spine for the rest of my life." "We managed," Ethan said carefully, accepting a cup of coffee from someone. Charlotte had already moved away, pulled into a conversation with Margaret and a few other senior staff members. Ethan watched her shift seamlessly back into CEO mode, discussing logistics and making decisions about the return trip. If she was at all affected by their night together, nothing in her demeanor showed it. "Man, you look exhausted," Travis observed. "Rough night?" "Couldn't sleep much," Ethan said, which was true enough. "Storm was pretty intense." The morning dragged on. Employees ate, charged their phones, called worried family members. Ethan managed to get through to his sister and spent 10 precious minutes talking to Emma, who was far more interested in telling him about the pillow fort she'd built than hearing about his adventure in the mountains. "I made it 5 stories tall, Daddy. Aunt Sarah said it's an engineering marvel." "I bet it is, sweetheart. I'll see it when I get home tonight, okay?" "Okay, love you." "Love you too, Em." Hanging up left Ethan feeling hollowed out in a way he couldn't quite explain. Emma was fine. He'd be home in a few hours. Everything was as it should be, so why did he feel like he was leaving something important behind in that small cabin? "Attention, everyone," Margaret's voice cut through the conversations. "The road's been cleared faster than expected. We're loading the shuttle in 20 minutes. Make sure you've got all your belongings from the cabins." A general scramble ensued. Ethan retrieved his bag from cabin 7, taking one last look at the space that had contained so much of last night. The bed was neatly made. Charlotte must have done that before leaving this morning. The fire reduced to cold ash. It looked like nothing had happened here at all. The shuttle ride back down the mountain was completely different from the terrifying ascent. The sun was out now, turning the snow-covered landscape into something magical. People chatted and laughed. The near disaster transformed into a bonding experience they'd talk about for years. Ethan sat in his same seat from before, watching the scenery pass. Charlotte was up front again, but this time she wasn't working on her tablet. She was staring out the window, lost in thought, her expression unreadable. Travis leaned over. "Did you hear Whitaker and some project manager got stuck together in one of the small cabins? Apparently there was only one bed." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Where'd you hear that?" "Margaret was telling someone this morning. Didn't mention who the project manager was, though. Poor bastard probably had to sleep on the floor while the CEO took the bed." Travis laughed. Can you imagine? Most awkward night ever. Yeah, Ethan said faintly. I can imagine. He caught Charlotte's reflection in the window. She was very deliberately not looking back at the rest of the bus. Her spine was rigid, her shoulders tense. She'd heard the conversation too. The shuttle pulled into the company parking lot just after noon. People scattered quickly, eager to get home, get warm, get back to their normal lives. Ethan grabbed his bag and was heading for his car when he heard his name. Mr. Cole. A moment? Charlotte was standing by her car, a sleek silver sedan that probably cost more than Ethan made in 2 years. She'd put on sunglasses despite the cloudy sky, hiding her eyes. Ethan walked over, very aware of the few remaining employees who might be watching. Yes, Miss Whitaker? The formality felt wrong after everything, but Charlotte didn't correct him this time. I wanted to thank you, she said quietly, for your discretion last night, and for being a gentleman about an uncomfortable situation. Of course. The words felt stiff, formal, nothing like the easy conversation they'd shared in the dark. It was no problem. Charlotte nodded once, crisp and professional. I'll see you in the office tomorrow then. Have a good rest of your weekend. She got in her car and drove away, leaving Ethan standing in the parking lot feeling like he'd just been dismissed, which he supposed he had been. The drive back to Ballard passed in a blur. Ethan picked up Emma from his sister's apartment, grateful for her endless chatter about her weekend, the way she climbed into his arms and hugged him tight. This was what mattered. This was real. His daughter, his life, his responsibilities. Charlotte Whitaker existed in a different world, and one night in a cabin didn't change that. But that night, after Emma was asleep, Ethan found himself standing at his apartment window, looking out at the Seattle skyline and thinking about a woman who'd admitted she was lonely, who'd held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a storm, who'd looked at him this morning like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and rain, typical Seattle weather that matched Ethan's mood perfectly. He dropped Emma at school, drove to the office, and tried to prepare himself for whatever came next. The office felt different somehow, though nothing had actually changed. Same cubicles, same break room coffee, same fluorescent lights. Ethan settled at his desk and pulled up the Meridian project files, determined to lose himself in work. At 10 o'clock, his phone rang. Internal extension. Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Charlotte Whitaker's office. She'd like to see you in her office at 11. Is that convenient? Ethan's pulse jumped. Yes, that's fine. He spent the next hour trying not to catastrophize. Maybe it was about the Meridian project. Maybe she wanted to discuss his performance review. Maybe, and this was the thought that made his hands shake slightly, she wanted to address what had happened in the cabin. At precisely 11 o'clock, Ethan knocked on the frosted glass door marked Charlotte Whitaker, CEO. Come in. Her office was on the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Charlotte sat behind a massive desk, every inch the powerful executive in a charcoal suit, her hair pulled back severely, her expression professionally neutral. Close the door, please, she said without preamble. Ethan did, then took the seat across from her desk. The formal setting felt wrong after the intimacy of the cabin, like they were playing roles in a script neither of them had written. Charlotte folded her hands on her desk. I've been thinking about what happened this weekend. So have I. It was inappropriate. I'm your superior, and regardless of the circumstances, I shouldn't have... She paused, seeming to search for the right word. Allowed things to become so personal. You didn't allow anything, Ethan said quietly. We were two people stuck in a bad situation, trying to stay warm. That's all it was, right? Charlotte's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Right, that's all it was. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. However, Charlotte continued, her tone shifting to something more businesslike, I want to be clear that this incident won't affect your position at the company. Your work speaks for itself, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or uncertain about your future here. I appreciate that. Additionally, I think it would be best if we maintained appropriate professional boundaries going forward. What happened was an anomaly. It doesn't need to happen again. Each word felt like a door closing, and Ethan found himself getting angry, not at Charlotte, but at the situation, at the rules that said two people who'd found something real couldn't explore it because of arbitrary corporate hierarchies. What if I don't want that? The words were out before he could stop them. Charlotte's composure cracked slightly. Excuse me? What if I don't want to pretend it didn't mean anything? Ethan leaned forward. Because it did mean something, Charlotte. You said so yourself yesterday morning. That was before I had time to think clearly about the implications. What implications? That you're the CEO and I'm a project manager? I'm aware of the power dynamic, but that doesn't change the fact that something happened between us that felt real. Charlotte stood abruptly, moving to the windows, her back to him. Real doesn't mean possible. You have a daughter to think about. I have a company to run. Getting involved would be complicated at best, disastrous at worst. People navigate complicated all the time. Not like this. She turned to face him, and Ethan could see the conflict in her eyes. Do you know what would happen if people found out we were involved? The gossip alone would undermine my authority. Every decision I make regarding you or your projects would be questioned. You'd be labeled as someone who slept his way into favor. Your career would suffer. So would yours, Ethan pointed out. Exactly, which is why this can't happen. Charlotte's voice was firm, but Ethan heard the slight tremor underneath. I'm asking you to be realistic about this. Ethan stood slowly. I am being realistic. Realistically, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since Saturday night. Realistically, I saw a side of you that I don't think many people get to see, and I liked it a lot. And realistically, I think you feel the same way, which is why you're working so hard to convince both of us this is impossible. Charlotte's professional mask slipped completely, leaving her looking vulnerable and uncertain. Ethan, I'm not asking you to make a decision right now, he said quietly. I'm just asking you to be honest. Did it mean something to you? Really? She looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan watched her wage an internal war between what she wanted and what she thought was right. Yes, Charlotte finally whispered. It meant something. The admission hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. Then maybe, Ethan said carefully, we owe it to ourselves to figure out what that means, instead of just shutting it down because it's complicated. And Charlotte moved back to her desk but didn't sit. Instead, she gripped the edge like it was the only thing keeping her upright. And what exactly are you proposing? That we date secretly? That I compromise my professional integrity? I'm proposing that we're honest about what we're feeling and see where it goes. I don't have all the answers, Charlotte, but I know that what I felt in that cabin wasn't just about being cold or scared. It was about you. This is insane, Charlotte said, but there was less conviction in her voice now. We barely know each other. Then let's get to know each other. Away from the office. No titles, no hierarchy, just two people having dinner, talking, seeing if what we felt was real or just a product of the circumstances. And if it is real, what then? We still work together. That doesn't change. Ethan took a risk and moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. If it's real, we figure it out. Together. Isn't that what you do with anything worthwhile? Figure out the complications instead of running from them? Charlotte's breath caught slightly. For a moment, Ethan thought she might reach for him, might close the distance between them. Instead, she stepped back, putting the desk between them again like a barricade. I need time to think about this, she said finally. This isn't a decision I can make impulsively. I understand. Do you? Charlotte's eyes searched his face. Because once we cross this line, Ethan, there's no going back. Everything changes. Your career trajectory, my professional reputation, the way people see both of us. Are you really ready for that? I don't know, Ethan admitted, but I'm willing to find out if you are. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, Ethan saw resignation and hope warring in equal measure. Give me a week, she said. 1 week to think clearly about this without the pressure of you standing in front of me making compelling arguments. A week, Ethan agreed. But Charlotte, whatever you decide, I need you to be honest with yourself about what you want, not just what you think is appropriate or professional or safe. That's what terrifies me, she said softly. What I want might not be what's wise. Ethan headed for the door but paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, I think you've spent enough years doing what's wise. Maybe it's time to do what makes you happy instead. He left before she could respond, his heart pounding as he walked back to his desk. He just laid everything on the line with his CEO, pushed for something that could either transform his life or destroy his career. The week that followed was excruciating. Ethan threw himself into work, staying late at the office, triple-checking project timelines, anything to keep his mind occupied. He saw Charlotte occasionally in meetings or passing in the hallway, and each time their eyes met, he saw the same conflict he felt reflected back at him. Emma noticed his distraction. "You're thinking about something," she announced Wednesday night over dinner. "Just work stuff, sweetheart." "Is it a problem?" "Because you always say problems are just puzzles waiting to be solved." Ethan smiled despite himself. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart, Daddy. You just finally noticed." On Friday evening, exactly 1 week after the storm, Ethan was packing up for the day when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Fireside Cafe. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Just 2 people having coffee. No titles. His hands shook slightly as he typed back. "I'll be there." Another buzz. "And Ethan? I've never been more terrified of anything in my life. Me either. But I think that means we're on to something real." The response came quickly. "I hope you're right." Ethan arrived at the Fireside Cafe 15 minutes early, which gave him far too much time to second-guess everything. The cafe was tucked into a quiet corner of Capitol Hill, the kind of place that felt deliberately chosen for its anonymity. Small tables, dim lighting, soft jazz playing just loud enough to provide cover for private conversations. Not the sort of place anyone from the office would accidentally stumble into on a Saturday afternoon. He chose a table near the back, away from the windows, and ordered coffee he didn't really want, just to have something to do with his hands. The minutes crawled by. 2 o'clock came and went. Ethan checked his phone 3 times, fighting the growing certainty that Charlotte had changed her mind, that she'd decided the risk was too great, that whatever had happened in that cabin would remain exactly what she'd tried to make it, a survival story and nothing more. Then the door opened, and there she was. Charlotte looked different outside the context of work. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back, minimal makeup. She could have been anyone, just a woman meeting someone for coffee on a rainy Seattle afternoon. But Ethan's heart still kicked up at the sight of her, at the way her eyes found his across the room with something that looked like relief. She crossed to his table, and they had an awkward moment where neither knew quite how to greet the other. A handshake seemed absurd after they'd spent a night wrapped in each other's arms. A hug felt presumptuous. They settled on uncertain smiles. "Hi," Charlotte said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Hi. I was starting to think you weren't coming." "I almost didn't." She signaled the waitress, ordered tea, then met his eyes directly. "I sat in my car for 10 minutes trying to convince myself this was a terrible idea." "What changed your mind?" "The realization that I've spent my entire adult life making the safe choice, the smart choice, the professional choice, and where has it gotten me?" Charlotte's laugh was soft and self-deprecating. "Alone in a beautiful house I barely live in, running a company that consumes every waking hour, with exactly 0 people in my life who know me as anything other than a CEO." Ethan reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "That doesn't have to be your whole story." "No," she agreed quietly. "Maybe it doesn't." The waitress brought Charlotte's tea, and they sat in silence for a moment, both trying to figure out how to start this conversation. Finally, Charlotte wrapped her hands around her cup and spoke. "I need you to understand something. I'm not good at this. At dating, at relationships, at letting people in. I haven't been on an actual date in probably 3 years. The last relationship I had ended because he couldn't handle that I worked more than I saw him. He said I was married to my job." She paused. "He wasn't wrong." "I'm not asking you to quit your job or stop caring about your company," Ethan said. "I'm just asking for a chance to see if there's room in your life for something else too." "And what about you? You have Emma to think about. Are you really ready to bring someone new into that equation?" "Because I have 0 experience with children, Ethan. I don't know the first thing about being part of a family. Emma's 7. She thinks dinosaurs are cool and matching socks are boring. Start there." Ethan smiled. "But honestly, Charlotte, I'm not asking you to be her mother. I'm asking if you want to get to know each other outside of that cabin, outside of the office. Everything else, we can figure out if we get there." Charlotte studied him over the rim of her cup. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is simple. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. Or maybe, Charlotte countered, the complications are real and we're being naive to think we can just ignore them. Then let's talk about them. Really talk about them. Ethan leaned forward. What's your biggest concern? Really? Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. That if this goes wrong, I lose everything. Not just you, which would hurt enough, but my credibility, my authority, the respect I've spent 15 years building. People already look for reasons to undermine women in leadership. If they think I'm sleeping with an employee, all of that goes away. I become a cautionary tale instead of a success story. The raw honesty in her words hit Ethan hard. I understand that fear. I do. But Charlotte, you're not sleeping with an employee, not yet anyway. He offered a small smile. We're two adults having coffee, trying to figure out if what we felt during the storm was real. That's all this is right now. And if it is real, what then? Then we handle it the right way. Transparent. Above board. We're not doing anything wrong. Aren't we? Charlotte's eyes searched his face. I have direct authority over your career, Ethan. Your projects, your promotions, your salary. That's a power imbalance that doesn't disappear just because our intentions are good. Ethan had thought about this all week, had wrestled with the same concerns. So we address it. Maybe I transfer to a different division. Maybe we bring HR into the loop early. Maybe I restructure the reporting system so you're not under my direct supervision anymore, Charlotte interrupted quietly. Ethan stared at her. You've already thought about this. I've thought about nothing else for a week. Charlotte set down her cup with deliberate care. There's a management reorganization I've been considering for a while. It would create a new VP of operations position that would oversee project management. You'd report to them instead of directly to me. It makes sense from a business perspective, regardless of anything personal between us. That's a big change to make for something that might not even work out between us. The change is good for the company either way, Charlotte insisted. But yes, it also removes the most problematic barrier between us. If we decide to pursue this, I want it to be on equal footing, not boss and employee, just two people. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he hadn't fully realized he'd been carrying. You've really been thinking about this. I told you I'm terrified. This is what terror looks like for me. Making contingency plans, running through every possible scenario, trying to control variables that can't be controlled. Charlotte's smile was rueful. It's exhausting. So stop, Ethan said gently. Stop trying to plan for every possible outcome and just be here, right now, with me. Tell me something real. Not about work, not about logistics. Something you want me to know about you. Charlotte looked startled by the question, then thoughtful. She took a sip of her tea, buying time, and Ethan could see her wrestling with vulnerability. I'm afraid of becoming my father, she said finally. He built the company, but it cost him everything else. His marriage fell apart when I was 12. He never remarried, never dated seriously, worked himself into an early grave at 59 because he literally couldn't imagine life without the company at the center of it. She met Ethan's eyes. I'm 42, Ethan. I'm already halfway there. No, you're not. Aren't I? I live alone. I work constantly. I can't remember the last time I did something just because it made me happy instead of because it advanced some professional goal. But you're here, Ethan pointed out, right now. This coffee isn't a business meeting. This is you choosing something that might make you happy. Charlotte's expression softened. You're right. This is different. She paused. Tell me something real about you now. Fair's fair. Ethan thought about what to share, what truth felt important in this moment. I'm afraid I'm failing Emma, that I'm so focused on providing for her financially, making sure she has everything she needs materially, that I'm missing the actual parenting part. My sister Sarah keeps telling me I'm too hard on myself, but some nights I lie awake wondering if Emma would be better off with a mother figure in her life, or if me being a single dad is somehow cheating her out of a normal childhood. From everything you've told me about her, Emma sounds happy and well-adjusted and loved, Charlotte said firmly. That's not failure, Ethan. That's success in the ways that actually matter. Logically, I know that, but the fear doesn't listen to logic. No, Charlotte agreed quietly. It really doesn't. They sat with that shared understanding for a moment, two people who'd both spent too long carrying fears they couldn't quite shake. The cafe hummed with quiet conversation around them, but at their table something fragile and important was taking shape. "So what do we do?" Charlotte asked. "Where do we go from here? How about we start simple? Dinner sometime, a real date. See how it feels when we're not trapped in a cabin or navigating office politics." "I'd like that." Charlotte's smile was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way that transformed her whole face. "Though I should warn you, I'm terrible at dating small talk. I'm much better at discussing construction permits and zoning variances." "Lucky for you, I find zoning variances fascinating." Charlotte laughed, and the sound erased years from her face. "You're a terrible liar." "Maybe, but I'm a great listener. So if you want to talk about work, talk about work. If you want to talk about anything else, we'll do that too. There's no script here, Charlotte. We get to figure this out as we go." "That might be the scariest part," she admitted, "not having a plan." "Or," Ethan countered, "it might be the most freeing thing you've done in years." They talked for 2 more hours, ordering more coffee and tea they barely touched. The conversation flowing between serious and light, past and present, hopes and fears. Charlotte told him about growing up in her father's shadow, about the pressure to prove herself when she took over the company. Ethan talked about Emma's mother leaving, about the early days of single parenthood when he'd been completely overwhelmed and terrified he'd break his daughter somehow. At some point, their hands had found each other across the table, fingers intertwined like it was the most natural thing in the world. Neither acknowledged it directly, but neither pulled away either. "I should probably go," Charlotte said eventually, though she made no move to stand. "I told myself I'd keep this short, controlled, not let myself get in too deep too fast. How's that working out for you?" "Terribly." But she was smiling. "When can I see you again?" "Whenever you want." Charlotte pulled out her phone, scrolling through what Ethan could see was a packed calendar. "I have a board meeting Monday, conference calls Tuesday morning, site visits Wednesday." "Thursday evening?" "There's a new Italian place in Fremont that's supposed to be excellent. Thursday works, 7 o'clock? Perfect." Charlotte squeezed his hand once, then slowly pulled away like breaking contact required actual effort. "Ethan, this still scares me. All of it." "Me too. But I think it's a good kind of scared. The kind that means something matters." Charlotte stood, gathering her coat and bag. "I'm going to hold you to that when I'm having a panic attack Tuesday afternoon about what we're doing. Call me. I'll talk you down." She paused, looking down at him with an expression that was equal parts terror and hope. This could be amazing or it could be a disaster. Only one way to find out. Charlotte leaned down suddenly, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek that somehow felt more intimate than everything that had happened in the cabin. Then she was gone, leaving Ethan sitting alone with cold coffee and the lingering warmth of her lips against his skin. He sat there for a while longer, processing what had just happened. They'd crossed a line today, moved from possibility into something concrete. Thursday. A real date. The thought made him nervous and exhilarated in equal measure. His phone buzzed as he was leaving the cafe. "Thank you for today, for being patient with me, for making me believe this might actually work. See." Ethan smiled as he typed back. "Thank you for taking the chance. See you Thursday." The days between Saturday and Thursday felt like they lasted both forever and no time at all. Ethan went through the motions at work, increasingly aware of Charlotte's presence in the building even when he couldn't see her. They'd exchanged a few texts, nothing inappropriate, just small moments of connection. Charlotte sending him a photo of an absurdly complicated zoning document with the caption, "Still think these are fascinating?" Ethan replying with a picture of Emma's latest dinosaur drawing and she wants to know if T-Rex really had feathers. On Wednesday, Charlotte made the announcement about the restructuring. A new VP of operations position would be created, effective immediately. Project managers, including Ethan, would now report through that chain instead of directly to the CEO's office. The move was met with general approval. It made sense organizationally, streamlined communication, reduced Charlotte's direct reports to a more manageable number. Only Ethan understood the real significance. Charlotte was removing the barriers between them, making good on what she'd said at the cafe. The realization made his chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to falling. Thursday evening arrived with typical Seattle rain, steady and relentless. Ethan dropped Emma at Sarah's apartment, enduring his sister's knowing looks and pointed questions about why he needed a babysitter on a work night. "It's just dinner with a friend," he insisted. "Uh-huh. You've combed your hair 3 times and you're wearing cologne. But sure, just dinner with a friend." "Sarah, I'm happy for you, you idiot." She squeezed his arm. "You deserve something good. Just don't forget to tell me all about her later." "Who says it's a her?" Sarah just laughed and pushed him toward the door. The Italian restaurant Charlotte had chosen was intimate and warm, with exposed brick walls and candles on every table. Ethan arrived exactly on time and found Charlotte already there, seated at a corner table, studying the wine list with the same intensity she probably brought to quarterly reports. She looked up as he approached, and her smile was immediate and genuine. She dressed simply, a navy dress that somehow managed to be elegant and understated at the same time. Her hair was down again, the way he was beginning to think he liked best. "Hi," Charlotte said as he sat down. "Hi. You look beautiful." She blushed slightly, and Ethan realized he'd probably never seen Charlotte Whitaker blush before. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." They ordered wine, and the sommelier launched into an enthusiastic description of the Chianti that Charlotte politely endured before ordering it anyway. Once they were alone again, she leaned forward slightly. "I've been nervous about this all day," she admitted, "which is ridiculous. We've already spent the night together, for heaven's sake. What's dinner compared to that?" "Dinner is somehow more real," Ethan said. "The cabin was this bubble outside normal life. This is us choosing each other in the real world." Exactly, and that's terrifying." Their wine arrived, and they both took grateful sips. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation around them, the clink of glasses and silverware, the occasional burst of laughter from nearby tables. It should have felt normal, comfortable even. Instead, Ethan felt like every nerve in his body was on high alert, hyper-aware of Charlotte across from him, of the significance of this moment. "Tell me about Emma," Charlotte said suddenly. "What does she want to be when she grows up?" "This week, a paleontologist. Last month it was a veterinarian. Before that, an astronaut. She's got options." Ethan smiled, the familiar warmth of talking about his daughter easing some of the tension. "She's at that age where anything feels possible. I envy that. That certainty that the world is full of possibilities." "What did you want to be when you were 7? Charlotte thought about it, a distant look in her eyes. "An architect, actually. I used to spend hours drawing elaborate buildings, designing entire cities. My father said it was impractical, that I should focus on business if I wanted to run the company someday." She laughed softly. "I listened to him, obviously." "Do you ever regret it? Not pursuing architecture?" "Sometimes, but I think I found a way to do it anyway, just differently. Every building we construct is something I've had input on. I might not draw the blueprints anymore, but I still get to help create something lasting." They ordered food, pasta for Charlotte, risotto for Ethan, and the conversation flowed more easily now. Charlotte asked about his early days in construction, the jobs that had taught him the business. Ethan asked about her first year running the company, the challenges she'd faced as a young woman taking over a male-dominated industry. "The first board meeting after my father died, one of the older board members actually suggested I sell the company and use the money to find a nice husband and start a family," Charlotte said, her tone dry. "I fired him 2 months later." Bet that felt good. It really did. Charlotte took a sip of wine. "Though sometimes I wonder if he was right in a way. Not about selling the company, but about the rest of it. I chose this path, and it's brought me success. But it's also meant sacrificing things most people take for granted. Relationships, family, a life outside of work." "It's not too late," Ethan said quietly. "Isn't it? I'm 42, Ethan. My childbearing years are basically over. And even if they weren't, I have no idea how to be a mother. I can barely keep a houseplant alive. Being a parent isn't something you're born knowing how to do. Trust me, I was completely clueless when Emma was born. Still am, half the time. You just figure it out as you go." Charlotte set down her fork, her expression serious. Is that what you want? More children? The directness of the question caught Ethan off guard. I don't know. I never really thought about it. Emma's been enough. More than enough. He paused. Why? Is that something you're thinking about? I'm thinking about a lot of things lately. Things I'd pushed aside as impossible or impractical. You've got me questioning all my assumptions. Charlotte's smile was rueful. It's extremely inconvenient. Sorry? No, you're not. You're right. I'm not. The waiter cleared their plates, and they ordered dessert to share. Tiramisu that arrived looking almost too beautiful to eat. Charlotte insisted Ethan take the first bite, then watched his reaction with amusement. Good? Incredible. Here. He offered her a forkful, and something shifted in the moment as she leaned forward to accept it. The gesture was intimate, domestic, the kind of thing couples did without thinking. Charlotte seemed to realize it at the same time he did, and their eyes met across the small table. This is working, she said softly, sounding almost surprised. We're working. Did you think we wouldn't? I thought the cabin was a fluke, that outside of those extreme circumstances, we wouldn't have anything in common, that you'd realize I'm boring and work-obsessed and terrible at small talk. Charlotte, you're brilliant and passionate and one of the most interesting people I've ever met, and your small talk is fine. It really isn't. I've been mentally rehearsing conversation topics all week. She laughed at herself. Do you know how pathetic that is? I think it's endearing. Shows you care. They lingered over coffee after dessert, neither wanting the evening to end. Eventually, though, the restaurant began to empty out, the staff shooting them polite but pointed looks. Charlotte insisted on splitting the check despite Ethan's protests. We're equals in this, she said firmly. I'm not your boss anymore, remember? I restructured specifically so we could do this without complications. You restructured the entire company management chain so you could buy me dinner? I restructured because it made good business sense. The fact that it also allows me to buy you dinner is just a bonus. They walked out into the rain together, standing under the restaurant's awning while the city glowed wet and beautiful around them. Charlotte's car was parked on the street, Ethan's half a block away. This was the moment where the date should end, where they should say goodnight and go their separate ways. Neither of them moved. I had a really good time tonight, Charlotte said finally. So did I. When can I see you again? Tomorrow? This weekend? Whenever you want. Charlotte stepped closer, and suddenly they were in each other's space in a way that felt deliberate and charged. I'm supposed to be taking this slow, being cautious and measured. How's that working out? About as well as you'd expect. Charlotte reached up, her hand cupping the side of his face. I can't stop thinking about you, about the cabin, about how right it felt to wake up in your arms. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Charlotte. She kissed him before he could finish the sentence. Not the careful, tentative kiss he might have expected, but something deeper, more certain, like she'd made a decision and was committing to it fully. Ethan responded immediately, his arms going around her waist, pulling her closer as the rain fell around them and the city faded into background noise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Charlotte rested her forehead against his. That was highly unprofessional, she murmured. Good thing you're not my boss anymore. Good thing, she agreed, then kissed him again, softer this time, but no less intense. They stood there in the rain under the awning, holding each other like they were still in that cabin, still seeking warmth in the storm. Except this time the storm was internal, the realization that whatever had started during the blizzard had transformed into something neither of them had quite anticipated. Come home with me, Charlotte said suddenly, then immediately looked panicked. I'm sorry, that was too forward. I didn't mean... Yes, Ethan interrupted. Yes? Yes, I want to come home with you, if you're sure. Charlotte pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm not sure about anything right now except that I don't want tonight to end. Is that enough? That's more than enough. They drove separately, Charlotte leading the way through rain-slicked streets to a neighborhood in Queen Anne that Ethan had always thought of as where rich people lived. Her house was beautiful, a modern design with floor-to-ceiling windows and clean lines. Inside was exactly what he expected. Expensive furniture, carefully chosen art, everything in its place. It was the home of someone successful and disciplined, and also profoundly lonely. Would you like something to drink? Charlotte asked, suddenly seeming nervous now that they were actually here. Charlotte, we don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I'm happy just being here with you. She turned to face him fully. I am ready. That's what scares me. I don't do spontaneous. I don't bring men home on first dates. I don't throw caution aside for feelings. She moved closer to him. But with you, all of that careful control I've built up just dissolves. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. Charlotte reached for him, her fingers threading through his hair. But I'm willing to find out. This time when they kissed, there was no hesitation, no holding back. They moved through her house in a blur, upstairs, down a hallway, into a bedroom that was as carefully designed as the rest of the house, but somehow felt more personal. Charlotte's hands were on his shirt buttons, and Ethan was discovering that the woman who commanded boardrooms with cool authority was equally commanding here in this intimate space. But there was also vulnerability in the way she looked at him, in the slight tremor of her hands, in the catch of her breath when he touched her. This mattered to her. He mattered to her. The realization was humbling and exhilarating all at once. Afterward, they lay tangled together in sheets that felt expensive and foreign to Ethan, the Seattle skyline visible through the windows. Charlotte's head was on his chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin. I didn't plan this, she said quietly. When I suggested dinner, I really did intend to take things slow. Plans change. Mine don't usually. Charlotte propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. I'm trying to figure out if I should be panicking right now. Are you panicking? Oddly, no. I probably should be. This is moving too fast. We barely know each other. There are still so many complications to work through, but right now, all I feel is... She paused, searching for the word. Content. Is that strange? No, Ethan said, pulling her back down against him. That's not strange at all. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, not talking, letting the weight of what had just happened settle over them. Eventually, Charlotte's breathing evened out into sleep, but Ethan stayed awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the whirlwind his life had become. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a single dad living a predictable life of work and parenting. Then a storm had trapped him in a cabin with a woman who'd somehow become essential in the span of a single night. And now here he was, in her bed, in her life, feeling things he hadn't felt in years, and wondering how something that should be complicated felt so remarkably simple. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Sarah. Hope dinner went well. Emma wants to know if you can take her to the aquarium tomorrow. S. Ethan smiled and typed back a response. Dinner was great. Aquarium sounds perfect. I'll pick her up at 10. Real life was waiting for him outside this bedroom, outside this perfect moment. Emma and work and all the usual responsibilities that defined his days. But for tonight, he let himself just be here, holding Charlotte while she slept, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breathing against him. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough. Morning came too soon, pale light filtering through Charlotte's bedroom windows and pulling Ethan from the deepest sleep he'd had in months. For a moment he forgot where he was, then felt the warmth of Charlotte beside him, and remembered everything. The dinner, the kiss in the rain, the decision to come here, and everything that had followed. Charlotte was already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're a terrible sleeper, she said softly. You talk in your sleep, did you know that? I do not. You absolutely do. You had an entire conversation with someone named Marcus about rebar specifications around 3 a.m. Ethan groaned, covering his face with his hands. That's mortifying. I thought it was charming. Very you. Charlotte traced a finger along his jaw. Though I have to ask, is work always on your mind, or was that just stress from spending the night with your former boss? You're not my boss anymore, remember? You restructured specifically to avoid that complication. True. So technically, this is just 2 consenting adults who happen to work for the same company in completely different divisions. Charlotte's smile was teasing, but Ethan could see the uncertainty underneath. Morning was when doubts crept in, when the magic of the previous night faced the harsh reality of daylight. Having regrets? He asked quietly. Charlotte was silent for a long moment, her fingers still tracing patterns on his skin. No. Scared? Yes. Uncertain about how we navigate this going forward? Absolutely. But regretting last night? Not even a little bit. Ethan pulled her down for a kiss, slow and thorough, before checking the time on his phone, 7:30. He needed to pick up Emma at 10, which meant he should probably leave soon, give himself time to go home and change before showing up at Sarah's apartment in yesterday's clothes. I have to get Emma, he said reluctantly. We're going to the aquarium. She likes aquariums? Loves them, especially the jellyfish exhibit. She says they look like aliens from another planet. Ethan sat up, already missing the warmth of the bed. I'm sorry to run out like this. Don't apologize. Emma comes first. That's exactly as it should be. Charlotte sat up too, pulling the sheet around herself. Though I'll admit, I'm already trying to figure out when I can see you again. Is that too clingy? I feel like that might be too clingy for one night together. It's not clingy. I'm doing the same mental calculation. Ethan found his scattered clothes, started dressing. What does your weekend look like? I was supposed to review budget projections, but suddenly that seems a lot less appealing than it did yesterday. Charlotte stood, wrapping herself in a robe that probably cost more than Ethan's entire wardrobe. What if I made you dinner tomorrow night? Here. A real home-cooked meal, not restaurant food. You cook? I'm passable. My repertoire is limited, but what I do make, I make well. She followed him down the stairs. And I'd like to cook for you, if you're interested. Very interested, though I should warn you, Emma's with Sarah all weekend, so if you're hoping to meet her, I'm hoping to have you to myself for one more evening before we figure out how to blend our very different lives together, Charlotte interrupted. Meeting Emma is important, but it's also huge. I don't want to rush that. She deserves better than some random woman her dad brings home after one date. The thoughtfulness of that answer made Ethan's chest tight. You're not some random woman. Not to you, maybe. But to Emma, I would be. And 7-year-olds don't need uncertainty in their lives. When we get to that point, if we get to that point, I want to be sure we're both ready for what it means. Ethan crossed back to her, cupping her face in his hands. You keep surprising me. Every time I think I've got you figured out, you say something that completely shifts my understanding. Is that good or bad? That's perfect. He kissed her once more, lingering despite knowing he needed to leave. Tomorrow night, what time? 7? And Ethan, don't dress up. I want comfortable, casual, just us. The drive home felt surreal, like moving between two different worlds. Charlotte's house in Queen Anne, with its clean lines and expensive furnishings and the smell of her perfume still clinging to his clothes. His apartment in Ballard, small and cluttered with Emma's toys and drawings, the life he'd built alone over the past 5 years. Could those two worlds actually merge? The question nagged at him as he showered and changed, as he drove to Sarah's apartment, as he watched Emma's face light up when she saw him. Daddy! She launched herself into his arms, all energy and warmth. Aunt Sarah says we're going to see the jellyfish. That's the plan, Em. Go grab your jacket. Sarah cornered him while Emma was getting ready, her expression knowing. So, that must have been some dinner. It was nice. You didn't get home until morning. That's more than nice. That's... Sarah, please. She held up her hands in surrender. Fine. But I'm happy for you, Ethan. Really. You deserve something good in your life besides work and parenting. Charlotte is good, Ethan said quietly. Really good. But it's also complicated. Anything worth having usually is. The aquarium was crowded with weekend families, parents chasing toddlers, while older kids pressed their faces against glass tanks. Emma was in heaven, darting from exhibit to exhibit with boundless energy, rattling off facts about different species with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every nature documentary ever made. Did you know the giant Pacific octopus can fit through any opening larger than its beak? She announced, staring at the massive creature undulating behind the glass. Their whole body is basically just a brain and a beak. Everything else is squishy. That's pretty amazing, Em. I think I want to be a marine biologist now instead of a paleontologist. Octopuses are way cooler than dinosaurs. She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the next tank. Come on, we haven't seen the sharks yet. Ethan let himself be dragged along, grateful for his daughter's uncomplicated joy, for the way she lived entirely in the present moment. No anxiety about the future, no dwelling on the past, Just pure excitement about sharks and octopuses and whatever came next. Later, sitting in the aquarium cafe while Emma demolished a grilled cheese sandwich, she looked at him with sudden seriousness. "Daddy, why are you smiling so much today?" "Am I smiling?" "Way more than usual, like when you're thinking about something happy." She took a sip of her juice box. "Did something good happen at work?" Ethan considered how to answer that. Emma was perceptive, always had been, and he'd never been good at lying to her, even about small things. "Something good happened, yeah. I made a new friend." "A friend or a grown-up friend?" "What's the difference?" Emma gave him the withering look that only a 7-year-old could master. A friend is someone you play with. A grown-up friend is someone you do boring grown-up stuff with, like talking about taxes. "Definitely a grown-up friend, then." "Is she pretty?" Ethan's eyebrows shot up. "What makes you think it's a she?" "Because you keep checking your phone and smiling at it, and Uncle Travis says that's what people do when they like someone." Emma grinned, entirely too pleased with her detective work. "So is she pretty?" "She's very pretty, and smart, and kind." Ethan reached across the table to tap Emma's nose. "But she's also someone I just met, so we're taking things slow, okay?" "Okay. But if you want to invite her over sometime, that's fine with me. I'm good at meeting new people." The casual acceptance in Emma's voice made Ethan's throat tight. She had no idea how much he needed to hear that, how much he'd been worrying about eventually introducing Charlotte into this part of his life. "Thank you, sweetheart. When the time's right, I'll definitely take you up on that." They spent the rest of the day together, just the two of them, and Ethan tried to stay present, to not let his mind drift back to Charlotte and tomorrow night and all the uncertainties that came with what they were building. But his phone buzzed periodically with texts, and each one made him smile despite himself. "Missing you already. Is that pathetic?" "C. Not pathetic. I'm missing you too." "E. How's the aquarium?" "C. Great. Emma has decided octopuses are better than dinosaurs. This is a major development." "E. She sounds wonderful. I'm nervous about meeting her someday." "C. She'll love you." "E. I hope you're right." "C." That night, after Emma was asleep, Ethan sat on his couch staring at the text thread with Charlotte and feeling the full weight of what he was potentially bringing into his daughter's life. Charlotte had been right to be cautious about meeting Emma. His daughter had already lost one mother who'd chosen to leave. Bringing someone new into her life meant accepting the risk that it might not work out, that Emma might get attached to someone who could ultimately walk away. But the alternative was living in fear forever, never taking chances, never allowing the possibility of something good because of the risk of something bad. That wasn't the lesson he wanted to teach his daughter. His phone buzzed again. "I'm overthinking everything. Tell me to stop." Ethan smiled and called her instead of texting back. She answered on the first ring. "Hi." Charlotte's voice was soft, intimate, like she'd been hoping he'd call. "Hi. Stop overthinking. That's terrible advice. Overthinking is basically my only skill. You have plenty of other skills. I have first-hand knowledge of several of them." Ethan could practically hear her blush through the phone. "Ethan Cole, are you flirting with me?" "Absolutely. Is it working?" "Yes, and I hate how much I enjoy it. I'm supposed to be the sophisticated older woman, remember? Not some teenager getting flustered by phone calls." "Charlotte, you're 8 years older than me, not 20, and sophisticated is overrated anyway." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was more serious. "Are we crazy, moving this fast? I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong." "So do I. But I keep coming back to the same conclusion. What we have is worth the risk." Ethan paused. "Unless you're having serious doubts, in which case we can slow down. Take a step back." No, I don't want to slow down. That's what scares me. I've spent my whole adult life being careful and measured, and with you, I just want to throw all of that aside and see where this goes." "Then let's do that. Let's stop overthinking and just be with each other. See what happens." "Tomorrow night," Charlotte said, 7 o'clock. "I'm making chicken piccata and trying very hard not to be terrified that I'll somehow screw it up." "I'm sure it'll be perfect." "You have far too much faith in my cooking abilities." They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything, until Charlotte's voice grew sleepy and she admitted she should probably go to bed. Sweet dreams, Ethan said. Only if you're in them. The next evening, Ethan stood outside Charlotte's door at exactly 7 o'clock, holding a bottle of wine he'd spent 20 minutes selecting and feeling more nervous than he had on their first date. This felt different somehow, more domestic, more real. Dinner at a restaurant could be dismissed as just dating. Dinner at her home, cooked by her hands, was something else entirely. Charlotte answered the door in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and Ethan thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "You're right on time," she said, accepting the wine with a smile. "That's either very punctual or very eager. Can it be both?" She laughed and pulled him inside, and immediately Ethan could smell something delicious cooking. Charlotte led him to the kitchen, where she'd clearly been working for a while. Multiple pots on the stove, a cutting board covered with lemon slices, her tablet propped up displaying a recipe. "I'm following instructions very carefully," she admitted. "This is not the time to improvise. Can I help?" "You can keep me company and tell me about Emma's aquarium adventure." So Ethan sat at her kitchen island, sipping the wine she'd poured, watching her move around her kitchen with focused determination, and told her about Emma's octopus obsession and shark enthusiasm, and the theory that jellyfish might be aliens. "She sounds exactly like you described her," Charlotte said, stirring something that smelled incredible. "Smart and curious and completely herself. That's Emma. No filter, no pretense. What you see is what you get." "I envy that. I spent so many years learning how to filter myself, how to present exactly the right image, that I'm not sure I remember how to be completely genuine anymore." "You're genuine with me." Charlotte looked up from the stove, meeting his eyes. "I know. That's what's so startling about this. I don't have to try with you. It just happens." Dinner was perfect. The chicken tender and flavorful, the pasta cooked exactly right, the whole meal evidence of careful attention and genuine effort. They ate at her dining room table with candles and good wine, and the conversation flowed as easily as it had in the cabin, at the cafe, in bed. "I have something I need to tell you," Charlotte said as they were finishing dessert, tiramisu again, this time from a bakery. "Something important." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Okay. I spoke with HR on Friday. Officially disclosed that we're in a relationship. They needed to know, especially given the restructuring and the fact that we work for the same company." "What did they say?" "That it's not a problem as long as there's no direct reporting relationship, which there isn't anymore. They'll keep it confidential, but it's on record now. If anyone ever questions the ethics of our relationship, we're covered." Ethan reached across the table for her hand. "You didn't have to do that. We've only been together a week." "I know, but I wanted everything above board. No secrets, no possibility of anyone accusing us of impropriety later. This way, we did everything right from the start." "You're amazing. You know that?" Charlotte's smile was soft, almost shy. "I just want to protect this, protect us, and protect you from any fallout that might come from dating the CEO. Former CEO. At least as far as my reporting chain is concerned. Semantics. People will still talk once they find out. They'll assume things about you, about your motivations, about whether you earned your position or slept your way into it. Let them talk. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. You say that now, but when you're passed over for a promotion you deserved because people assume you got too many advantages already. Or when you're getting knowing looks in meetings. Charlotte." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "I'm a grown man who makes his own choices. I chose this. I chose you. Whatever consequences come with that, I'm ready for them." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for doubt or hesitation. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she stood and moved around the table to his side, settling into his lap like she belonged there. "How did I get so lucky?" she murmured against his neck. "Pretty sure I'm the lucky one here." They migrated to the couch after cleaning up. Charlotte curled against Ethan's side while some movie neither of them was really watching played on the television. This was what Ethan had been missing all these years, not just physical intimacy, but this quiet companionship, the comfort of another person's presence, the knowledge that he didn't have to face everything alone. "Tell me something you've never told anyone else," Charlotte said suddenly. "That's a dangerous request." "I know. Tell me anyway." Ethan thought about what to share, what secret felt safe enough to voice but significant enough to matter. Sometimes I resent Emma's mother. Not for leaving. Honestly, she did us both a favor there. But for making it seem so easy. For walking away without looking back, like our daughter was just something she could discard when it didn't fit her life anymore. He paused, the old anger surfacing. Emma asks about her sometimes. Where she is, why she doesn't visit. And I have to make up gentle lies instead of saying the truth, which is that her mother chose not to be in her life, and that's on her, not on Emma. Charlotte was quiet, her hand rubbing slow circles on his chest. That's a lot to carry. Your turn. Tell me something you've never told anyone. She took a breath and Ethan felt her body tense slightly. I blame myself when my father died. He had a heart attack at the office, working late like he always did. I'd called him earlier that day to argue about a project decision, got heated about it, said some things I shouldn't have, and then he was just gone. For years, I convinced myself that the stress of that argument contributed to the heart attack. Logically, I know that's not how it works, but the guilt stayed anyway. Charlotte, you know that wasn't your fault. I do, most days. But some days when I'm working too hard or making decisions he might have disagreed with, I wonder if I'm honoring his legacy or destroying it. She lifted her head to look at him. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both carrying guilt for things we can't control. Maybe that's why this works. We understand each other's damage. Is that what we're calling it? Damage? Scars, then. We understand each other's scars. Charlotte kissed him, slow and deep, and Ethan felt the conversation shift from words to something beyond them. They made their way upstairs eventually, to her bed that was becoming familiar, and this time there was less urgency, more tenderness, like they were both trying to memorize each moment, store up these perfect hours against whatever challenges might come. Later, Charlotte's head on his chest again, her breathing slowing toward sleep, she murmured, I could get used to this. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. The following week slipped into a pattern that felt almost too good to be real. Ethan focused on work during the day, picking up Emma from school in the afternoons, maintaining the routines that structured their lives. But several evenings a week, after Emma was asleep and Sarah had agreed to stay at his apartment, he'd drive to Queen Anne and spend stolen hours with Charlotte. They were careful at the office, maintaining professional distance, barely interacting in ways that might draw attention. But the knowledge of what waited outside those walls made the discretion bearable. More than bearable. It added a layer of anticipation that made coming together at the end of the day even sweeter. We can't keep this secret forever, Charlotte said one evening, 3 weeks into their relationship. They were cooking dinner together, or rather, Ethan was cooking while Charlotte chopped vegetables with intense concentration, determined to contribute despite her limited culinary skills. I know, eventually people will notice. How do you want to handle it when they do? Ethan considered the question. Honestly, I want to stop hiding. I want to be able to acknowledge that we're together without it being some scandalous secret. Even knowing the gossip it'll generate? Even knowing that. Charlotte, I'm proud to be with you. I don't want to hide it like there's something wrong with what we have. She set down her knife, turning to face him fully. There's something I've been thinking about. A way to maybe make this easier. I'm listening. The company's annual charity gala is in 6 weeks. It's a big event. Clients, board members, employees, everyone brings dates. I usually go alone, but... She paused, meeting his eyes. What if I didn't this year? What if I brought you? Ethan's heart kicked up. That would be making a very public statement. Exactly. It would announce our relationship on our terms, in a controlled environment. No sneaking around, no hiding. Just us, together, at a company event. People will talk. They'll talk anyway once they find out. At least this way we control the narrative. Ethan thought about it, about walking into that gala with Charlotte on his arm, about the statement it would make to everyone who'd wondered about the mysterious restructuring, about the gossip it would inevitably generate. Yes, he said finally. Let's do it. Let's stop hiding. Charlotte's smile was brilliant and relieved. Really? You're sure? I'm sure. But Charlotte, there's something we need to do first. What's that? I need to introduce you to Emma. If we're going public with this relationship, if we're making it official, she needs to be part of that conversation. She deserves to know what's happening in my life. Charlotte's expression shifted to something more vulnerable, almost scared. You want me to meet your daughter? Only if you're ready. But yes, I think it's time. She took a shaky breath, and Ethan watched her wrestle with the magnitude of what that meant. Meeting Emma wasn't just meeting his daughter. It was accepting that this relationship was serious, that they were building towards something long-term. I'm terrified, Charlotte admitted. What if she doesn't like me? What if I say the wrong thing or can't connect with her? Or Ethan pulled her into his arms, cutting off the spiral of anxiety. Emma is 7. She likes dinosaurs and octopuses and mismatched socks. Just be yourself. Be the Charlotte I know, smart and kind and genuine. That's all you need to be. When? Charlotte's voice was muffled against his chest. Next Saturday? We could do something casual. Maybe lunch and a trip to the park. Low pressure, just getting to know each other. Charlotte pulled back to look at him. Saturday. Okay, I can do Saturday. She paused. I'll probably panic 17 times between now and then, but I can do Saturday. Call me every time you panic. I'll talk you through it. That week, Charlotte called him 4 times with varying degrees of anxiety about meeting Emma. What should she wear? What should they talk about? Should she bring a gift? Was bringing a gift too much? Would Emma think she was trying too hard? Ethan answered each question with patience, amused and touched by how much this mattered to her. On Friday evening, the night before the planned meeting, Charlotte called in a full spiral. I can't do this. I'm going to screw it up. Emma will hate me and you'll realize I'm completely wrong for this. And Charlotte, breathe. I don't know how to talk to children, Ethan. I don't have younger siblings or nieces or nephews. My entire experience with kids is when I was a kid myself, and that was decades ago. You're overthinking this. Emma's a person, just a small one. Talk to her like you'd talk to anyone else. Be interested in what she's interested in. Ask her questions. That's literally all parenting is half the time, paying attention and asking questions. What if I ask the wrong questions? There are no wrong questions. Well, okay, don't ask her about taxes or stock portfolios, but anything else is fair game. Charlotte laughed despite herself. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. You're just scared because this matters to you, because Emma matters, and you want her approval. Of course I want her approval. She's the most important person in your life. If she doesn't accept me, she will. I know my daughter, Charlotte. She's open-hearted and curious and excited to meet you. Just be yourself. Saturday arrived clear and bright, one of those perfect spring days Seattle occasionally gifted its residents. Ethan picked Charlotte up at noon, and she emerged from her house looking beautiful and terrified in jeans and a casual top that had probably still cost more than anything in Ethan's closet. I feel like I'm about to give the most important presentation of my life, she said, buckling her seatbelt. Except Emma's a much friendlier audience than any board of directors you've faced. They picked up Emma from Sarah's apartment, and Ethan watched his daughter's eyes go wide when Charlotte stepped out of the car. You're really pretty, Emma announced with typical 7-year-old bluntness. Are you Daddy's grown-up friend? Charlotte crouched down to Emma's level, and Ethan saw her take a steadying breath. I am. My name's Charlotte. It's really nice to meet you, Emma. Are you taking us to lunch? Because I'm really hungry. Aunt Sarah only gave me cereal for breakfast and it's already lunchtime. I heard about a really good burger place near here, Charlotte said carefully. Would you like to go there? Do they have milkshakes? I think so. Then yes, I definitely want to go there. Emma grabbed Charlotte's hand with complete unself-consciousness, and Ethan watched Charlotte's eyes widen at the casual physical contact. Do you like dinosaurs? I don't know much about them, actually. That's okay. I can teach you. Did you know that the Tyrannosaurus Rex had teeth as big as bananas, and they could bite with like 1,000,000 pounds of force? That's terrifying. I know! Isn't it awesome? The lunch was easier than Charlotte had feared. Emma chattered nonstop about school and her latest dinosaur facts and the octopus documentary she'd watched 3 times. Charlotte listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma light up with the joy of having an adult who actually cared about her answers. Charlotte works with Daddy, Ethan explained at one point. She helps run the company where I work. Oh, are you his boss? Not anymore, Charlotte said carefully. We work in different departments now. Because you're dating? Charlotte's eyes shot to Ethan, clearly uncertain how to answer. He stepped in smoothly. Because it makes more sense that way, Em. But yes, Charlotte and I are dating. Is that okay with you? Emma considered this while working on her milkshake. I guess so. You seem happy. And Charlotte seems nice. She turned to Charlotte directly. Are you going to come over sometimes? I'd like to, if that's okay with you. It's fine. Just so you know, Daddy makes really good spaghetti on Wednesdays, and we always watch a movie on Friday nights. Those are our traditions. Those sound like wonderful traditions, Charlotte said softly, and Ethan could see her eyes getting slightly damp. After lunch, they went to a nearby park. Emma ran ahead to the playground while Ethan and Charlotte followed at a slower pace. She's perfect, Charlotte said quietly, watching Emma climb the jungle gym with fearless enthusiasm. She's exactly as wonderful as you said she was. She likes you too, I can tell. How can you possibly tell? She's barely said 2 words directly to me. She grabbed your hand in the parking lot without hesitation. She shared her milkshake with you. She invited you to family movie night. Ethan took Charlotte's hand, threading their fingers together. For Emma, those are major signs of approval. They sat on a bench while Emma played, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest as he watched Charlotte watch his daughter. This was his life. Not the corporate world or the construction projects, but these quiet moments in the park with the people who mattered. And Charlotte was becoming part of that, seamlessly integrating into the life he'd built. "Push me on the swings!" Emma called, and before Ethan could move, Charlotte was up and heading over. He watched her figure out the right amount of force, listened to Emma's delighted squeals, saw Charlotte's genuine smile as she engaged with his daughter. This was what he'd been afraid to hope for, someone who could love both parts of his life, who could be his partner and Emma's friend. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How's it going?" S. Better than I could have hoped. E. That good? S. That good. On the drive back, Emma fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from running around the playground. Charlotte turned to look at her, her expression soft. "Thank you," she said quietly to Ethan. "For what?" "For trusting me with this. With her. I know how much Emma means to you." "You mean something to me too, Charlotte. I wouldn't have introduced you if I wasn't serious about this." "I know. That's what makes it so real and so terrifying." She reached over, squeezing his hand briefly before releasing it so he could focus on driving. "But also wonderful. I haven't felt this happy in longer than I can remember." "Neither have I." After dropping Emma back at Sarah's, she had a sleepover birthday party that evening. Ethan drove Charlotte home. They sat in her driveway for a moment, neither quite ready to part. "So," Charlotte said, "the gala is in 4 weeks. Are you still ready to go public?" "More ready than ever. Today just confirmed what I already knew. This is real. We're real. Why should we hide it?" Charlotte leaned over and kissed him, soft and lingering. 4 weeks. Then everyone knows. 4 weeks, Ethan agreed. No more hiding. The 4 weeks leading up to the gala passed in a blur of work, stolen evenings together, and Charlotte becoming an increasingly natural presence in Ethan's life. She started joining them for their Friday movie nights, initially sitting stiffly on the couch while Emma explained the intricate plot of whatever animated film she'd chosen, but gradually relaxing into the rhythm of their household. By the 3rd week, Charlotte was the one making popcorn while Ethan got Emma into her pajamas, and nobody thought twice about it. Emma accepted Charlotte with the easy adaptability of children, asking her opinions on important matters like whether purple or green was a better color for dinosaurs, and sharing elaborate theories about how jellyfish might actually be time travelers. Charlotte listened with genuine interest, and Ethan watched her slowly shed the careful control she brought to every other aspect of her life. At work, they maintained their professional distance, though Ethan caught Charlotte's eyes on him during meetings more than once, a small smile playing at her lips before she'd force her attention back to budget reports or project timelines. The secret felt both thrilling and exhausting, this double life they were leading. But all of that was about to change. The night of the gala arrived with typical Seattle rain, steady and persistent against Ethan's apartment windows as he stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. The tuxedo rental had cost more than he'd wanted to spend, but Charlotte had insisted this was a formal event, the kind where showing up in a regular suit wouldn't cut it. "You look fancy, Daddy." Emma observed from her position on his bed, where she was supposedly reading but actually watching him with undisguised amusement. I feel ridiculous. You look like a prince. Charlotte's going to think you're handsome. Charlotte already thinks I'm handsome, Ethan said with more confidence than he felt. Are you nervous about people seeing you together? Ethan turned to face his daughter fully, struck once again by how perceptive she was. A little bit, yeah. Some people might think it's strange that Charlotte and I are dating. Because she used to be your boss? Something like that. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. But you like each other, right? And you're both nice people, so I don't see why anyone would care. You're absolutely right, Em. They shouldn't care. Ethan crossed to the bed and kissed the top of her head. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just keep forgetting. Sarah arrived to stay with Emma, giving Ethan an appraising look as he grabbed his keys. You clean up nice. Charlotte's a lucky woman. Pretty sure I'm the lucky one. You're both lucky. Now go knock 'em dead. The drive to the venue, a historic hotel in downtown Seattle that had been fully renovated but kept its old-world charm, did nothing to settle Ethan's nerves. He'd been to company events before, but never as anyone's date, and certainly never as the CEO's date. Former CEO, he reminded himself. Charlotte had restructured specifically to remove that complication. But people wouldn't see it that way. People would see a project manager who'd somehow ended up with the most powerful woman in the company, and they'd make assumptions. Some kind, most not. He was early, deliberately so, wanting to meet Charlotte before facing the crowd. She'd texted him the room number of the suite where she was getting ready, and Ethan made his way through the elegant lobby to the elevators, his heart hammering against his ribs. Charlotte answered his knock wearing a robe, her hair half done, makeup scattered across the bathroom counter visible behind her. You're early, she said, but she was smiling as she pulled him inside. I wanted to see you before the chaos started. I'm glad. I've been having minor panic attacks for the past hour. Charlotte gestured to her dress hanging on the closet door, a deep emerald green that would look stunning against her dark hair. Help me with the zipper when I'm ready? Of course. He watched her finish her makeup with steady hands that contradicted the anxiety in her eyes, watched her step into the dress and turn so he could zip her up, his fingers lingering on the exposed skin of her back. We don't have to do this, Ethan said quietly. If you're having second thoughts, we can walk in separately. Pretend we just ran into each other. Charlotte turned to face him, and she was breathtaking, the dress fitting her perfectly, her hair swept up elegantly, her eyes bright with determination and fear in equal measure. No, I'm done hiding, done pretending that what we have is something to be ashamed of. She took his hands in hers. Are you ready for this? Really ready? Because once we walk through those doors together, there's no taking it back. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Charlotte's smile was tremulous but genuine. Then let's go make a statement. The ballroom was already filling with people when they arrived, employees in their finest, board members and their spouses, clients and investors, all mingling with champagne glasses and polite conversation. A string quartet played softly in one corner, and the whole scene had an air of refined elegance that made Ethan acutely aware of how far outside his usual world this was. But then Charlotte's hand found his, fingers intertwining with quiet confidence, and suddenly it didn't matter. They were just two people who cared about each other, facing the world together. The reaction was immediate and rippling. Conversations died mid-sentence as people noticed Charlotte Whitaker entering with a date, their eyes tracking to Ethan with varying degrees of recognition and surprise. He could literally watch the information spread through the room, heads turning, whispers starting, eyes widening. Stay with me, Charlotte murmured, though Ethan couldn't tell if she was talking to him or to herself. They made their way in through the crowd, Charlotte stopping to greet board members and key clients with her usual grace, introducing Ethan each time simply as, my date, Ethan Cole. No elaborate explanations, no justifications, just simple truth. Most people took it in stride, offering polite congratulations or warm smiles. A few looked uncomfortable, uncertain how to react, and a handful, mostly older board members who'd known Charlotte's father, had expressions that ranged from disapproving to openly hostile. Charlotte, one silver-haired man said, his tone carefully neutral, this is unexpected. Edward, Charlotte's voice was equally neutral. May I introduce Ethan Cole? Ethan, this is Edward Morrison, one of our longest-serving board members. Mr. Morrison. Ethan extended his hand, which the older man shook with obvious reluctance. Cole, you work for the company, I understand. I'm a project manager, yes. How convenient. The words dripped with implication, and Ethan felt Charlotte stiffen beside him. Edward, perhaps we could discuss your concerns in private, Charlotte said with dangerous calm, rather than making a scene at a charity event. Morrison's eyes narrowed. There's nothing to discuss, though I do wonder what your father would think of this situation. My father built this company on merit and integrity, and I've spent 15 years honoring that legacy. My personal life has no bearing on my professional capabilities, and I won't justify my choices to you or anyone else. Charlotte's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to introduce Ethan to some people who will actually be happy to meet him. She steered Ethan away before Morrison could respond, but Ethan could feel the tension radiating from her. You okay? He asked quietly. I will be. That was always going to happen. Edward's been looking for reasons to undermine me since the day I took over. Charlotte took a steadying breath. Let's find some friendlier faces. They did eventually. Margaret from HR offered genuine congratulations and admitted she'd figured out their relationship weeks ago. Several younger employees seemed delighted by the news, and Travis cornered Ethan with a huge grin. Man, I knew there was something different about you lately. You've been way too happy for someone who's just working and parenting. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Good for you, Cole. She seems great. She is great. Just don't forget us little people now that you're dating the CEO. Former CEO of my division, Ethan corrected with a smile. And trust me, that's not happening. The evening progressed with speeches about the charity the gala supported, a foundation that provided construction training and jobs for homeless youth, and Charlotte gave a passionate address about the importance of using their industry's resources to create opportunities. Ethan watched her command the room with effortless authority and felt a swell of pride that had nothing to do with her professional accomplishments and everything to do with knowing the vulnerable, uncertain woman beneath the polished exterior. During dinner, seated at the head table as Charlotte's date, Ethan endured more scrutiny and whispered conversations than he'd ever experienced in his life. But Charlotte's hand found his under the table periodically, squeezing gently, reminding him they were in this together. Having regrets yet? She murmured during dessert. Not even close, you? Ask me again when we see what the gossip blogs say tomorrow. Charlotte, I really don't care what gossip blogs say about us. She looked at him with something that might have been wonder. You really mean that, don't you? Of course I mean it. Let them talk. Let them speculate. None of it changes what we actually have. Charlotte leaned in and kissed him, right there at the head table in front of 200 people, and Ethan heard the collective intake of breath around them. When she pulled back, her smile was defiant and free. There, she said, now they really have something to talk about. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of dancing and conversation and stolen moments in quiet corners. Charlotte introduced Ethan to everyone who mattered, and he watched her navigate the complex social dynamics with practiced ease, always making sure he felt included, always positioning their relationship as the natural, right thing it was. Around 11, as the crowd began to thin, Charlotte pulled him onto the dance floor one last time. The quartet was playing something slow and romantic, and she fit against him perfectly, her head resting on his shoulder. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For being exactly who you are. For not being intimidated by my world or my position. For standing beside me tonight when I know it wasn't easy. Charlotte, standing beside you is the easiest thing I've ever done. She lifted her head to look at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you. I know it's too soon to say that. I know we've only been together a few months, but I do. I love you. Ethan's heart stopped, restarted, and then was racing. It's not too soon. And I love you too. I think I have since that night in the cabin when you admitted you were lonely, and I realized I'd been lonely too, just waiting for someone exactly like you. They kissed there on the dance floor, and this time Ethan didn't care who was watching or what they'd say. This was his life now, this woman in his arms, this future they were building together. Later, much later, they ended up back at Charlotte's house, trading the formal wear for comfortable clothes and sitting on her couch with glasses of wine, processing the evening. It went better than I feared, Charlotte admitted. Morrison was awful, but most people seemed genuinely happy for us. They were. Because you're respected and liked, and they want you to be happy. I am happy. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm actually genuinely happy. Charlotte set down her wine and turned to face him fully. Move in with me. Ethan blinked, certain he'd heard wrong. What? Move in with me. You and Emma. This house is too big for one person anyway, and you're here most nights already. It makes sense. Charlotte, that's huge. Are you sure you're ready for that? For a 7-year-old and all the chaos that comes with her? I'm terrified, Charlotte said honestly. I have no idea how to share space with people or deal with the mess that children apparently generate constantly. But I want to try. I want you here permanently. I want to wake up with you every morning and come home to you every evening. I want Emma's dinosaur drawings on my refrigerator and mismatched socks in my laundry. I want all of it. Ethan pulled her close, overwhelmed by the enormity of what she was offering. We should talk to Emma first. Make sure she's comfortable with such a big change. Of course. But Ethan, if she says yes, will you? Will you take this leap with me? Yes. 1,000 times yes. They told Emma the following weekend, sitting her down in Charlotte's living room with serious expressions that immediately put her on alert. Am I in trouble? She asked, eyes wide. No, sweetheart, not at all, Ethan assured her. Charlotte and I wanted to ask you about something important. Okay. Charlotte took a breath, and Ethan watched her gather her courage. Emma, how would you feel about moving here, to this house, with me, all of us living together as a family? Emma looked between them, processing this information with characteristic seriousness. Forever? Well, we'd start with trying it and see how it goes, Charlotte said carefully. But yes, the idea would be permanently. You'd have your own room, we'd decorate it however you want, and would I still go to my same school? No, you'd have to switch schools. But there's an excellent elementary school just a few blocks from here. We could visit it before you decide. Emma was quiet for a long moment, and Ethan felt his heart hammering. If she said no, he'd respect that decision, but it would complicate everything. Can I have a big room, bigger than my room now? Charlotte's smile was tentative but hopeful. You can have the biggest bedroom upstairs. It has its own bathroom and a window seat. And you promise you won't get mad about my dinosaur collection? Because I have a lot of dinosaurs. I promise. Though you might have to teach me all their names. Emma looked at Ethan. What do you think, Daddy? I think it could be really wonderful. But it's a big change, Em. You get to have a say in this. She thought about it for another moment, then nodded decisively. Okay, let's try it. But Charlotte, you have to promise to watch movies with us on Fridays. That's very important. Charlotte laughed, the sound watery with relief. I absolutely promise Friday movie nights. That's non-negotiable. Then okay, when do we move? The transition happened gradually over the next month. They started with weekends at Charlotte's house, Emma slowly claiming her new room, filling it with toys and books and the extensive dinosaur collection she'd mentioned. Charlotte watched this invasion of her pristine home with bemused acceptance, learning to navigate scattered Lego bricks and finding sticky fingerprints on surfaces she'd never imagined could get dirty. I had no idea children were this chaotic, she said one evening, staring at the explosion of craft supplies covering her dining room table. Welcome to parenthood, Ethan said with a grin. Still think this was a good idea? Charlotte surveyed the mess, then looked at Emma carefully gluing glitter to construction paper with intense concentration, and her expression softened completely. Best idea I've ever had. The full move happened 6 weeks after the gala, Ethan and Emma officially leaving the Ballard apartment and establishing themselves in Queen Anne. Sarah helped with the transition, offering advice and emotional support, and only occasionally teasing Ethan about how far he'd come from the terrified single father she'd helped so many times. You've built something good here, she told him one afternoon, watching Charlotte and Emma in the backyard examining some bug Emma had discovered. Something real. I know. Sometimes I can't quite believe it's my life. Believe it. You deserve this, Ethan. All of it. Work settled into a new normal, too. The initial gossip about their relationship faded as people realized there was no scandal, no impropriety, just two professionals who happened to be in a committed relationship. Ethan's projects continued to succeed on their merits, and Charlotte's leadership remained as strong as ever, untainted by accusations that she was showing favoritism. Morrison tried to make an issue of it at one board meeting, suggesting that Charlotte's judgment was compromised. She'd shut him down with devastating precision, walking the board through every project Ethan had ever managed, showing how his success rate and efficiency had actually remained completely consistent before and after their relationship began. Mr. Cole's professional achievements have nothing to do with our personal relationship, she'd said coolly. And if you're suggesting otherwise, I'd recommend you examine the actual data rather than relying on speculation and prejudice. Morrison had backed down, and the matter was never raised again. The months slipped by, spring turning to summer and then fall. Emma thrived in her new school, making friends easily and announcing periodically that having Charlotte around was pretty cool, actually. Charlotte learned to braid hair and pack school lunches and navigate the complex social dynamics of 7-year-old birthday parties with the same determination she brought to board meetings. One evening in late November, almost a year after the storm that had started everything, Ethan came home from work to find Charlotte in the kitchen attempting to make dinner while Emma sat at the counter doing homework. "Dad, Charlotte's making your famous spaghetti," Emma announced, "except it's not as good as yours yet." "Hey," Charlotte protested, but she was laughing. "I'm trying, cut me some slack." Ethan kissed her hello, tasting tomato sauce on her lips, and felt that same overwhelming gratitude that had become a constant in his life. This was his family now, these two people, this house that had transformed from a showplace to a home, this life they'd built together. "I have an idea," Charlotte said as they sat down to dinner. The spaghetti was actually pretty good, though Ethan would never tell her it still needed work. "I was thinking we could take a trip, the three of us." "Where to?" Emma asked, immediately interested. "I was thinking the mountains. There's a lodge in the Cascades that's supposed to be beautiful this time of year. We could go for a long weekend, do some hiking, just get away from the city." Ethan met her eyes across the table and understood immediately. "The same mountains where we went for that corporate retreat?" "Actually, yes. The same area." Charlotte's smile was soft and knowing. "I thought it might be nice to go back. See it differently this time." "Can we stay in a cabin?" Emma wanted to know. "With a fireplace?" "We can definitely stay in a cabin with a fireplace." "Then yes, let's go." 2 weeks later, they made the drive up into the Cascades. The three of them packed into Charlotte's car with luggage and snacks, and Emma's endless playlist of songs she insisted they all had to hear. The mountains were beautiful, snow already dusting the peaks, even though winter hadn't officially arrived. The lodge Charlotte had booked was different from the emergency shelter where they'd been stranded. This was a proper resort with luxury cabins and amenities. Their cabin had 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a pristine lake. "This is amazing." Emma ran from room to room, exploring with unbridled enthusiasm. "Can I have the room with the bunk beds?" "All yours, sweetheart," Ethan told her. That evening, after Emma had finally exhausted herself and fallen asleep in her bunk bed, Ethan and Charlotte sat in front of the fireplace with glasses of wine, wrapped in blankets and watching the flames dance. "Thank you for suggesting this," Ethan said quietly. "It's perfect. I wanted to come back here with you, show you that what started in a storm has become something steady and permanent." Charlotte shifted to look at him. That night in the emergency cabin, I was so terrified of what I was feeling, of how much I wanted something I'd convinced myself I could never have. And now? Now I'm terrified of completely different things, like how to help Emma with her math homework, or whether I'm doing enough to be a good parental figure, or if I'm somehow failing at this whole family thing. "Charlotte, you're not failing. Emma adores you. You're doing amazing." "I hope so. Because this is everything to me now. You and Emma, this life we've built." She set down her wine and reached into her pocket, pulling out a small box that made Ethan's heart stop. "Charlotte, I know we've only been together a year. I know by conventional standards this might seem fast. But Ethan, I've spent my whole adult life being conventional and careful and measured, and it brought me success but never happiness. Not real happiness." She opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "You and Emma brought me happiness. You brought me home.
So I'm asking, in this place where everything started, will you marry me? Ethan stared at her, at this brilliant, powerful woman who'd learned to braid hair and pack lunches and love with her whole heart, and felt tears burning in his eyes. Yes, absolutely yes.
Charlotte slipped the ring onto his finger, a platinum band that felt both foreign and right, and kissed him with the same intensity she'd brought to that first kiss in the cabin, desperate and certain and full of promise. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love our life. I love our family. I love everything we've become together." "I love you too. More than I thought I could love anyone." They sat there in front of the fire, holding each other the way they had that first night, but everything was different now. They weren't strangers seeking warmth in a storm. They were partners, building a future together, with Emma sleeping safely in the next room and a life full of possibilities stretching ahead of them. The next morning, they told Emma over breakfast, and she responded with characteristic enthusiasm. "Does this mean Charlotte's going to be my stepmom officially?" "If that's okay with you," Charlotte said carefully. Emma pretended to think about it, drawing out the suspense before breaking into a huge grin. "That's very okay with me. Can I be a flower girl at the wedding?" "You can be whatever you want to be." They spent the rest of the weekend hiking through snow-dusted trails, building snowmen, and sitting by the fire while Emma read aloud from her current favorite book. It was simple and perfect, and Ethan couldn't help but think about how far they'd come from that terrified night in the emergency cabin. On their last evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Ethan and Charlotte took a walk under the stars, the mountain air crisp and clean around them. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Charlotte asked, her breath misting in the cold. "When I admitted I was lonely?" "I said lonely was the price you'd paid for success." "No, after that. You said that strength didn't mean facing everything alone." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "You were right. I'd spent so long being strong by myself that I'd forgotten there was another way. A better way. We're stronger together than either of us ever was alone." "Exactly." Charlotte pulled him close, and they stood there under the stars, in the mountains where their story had begun, surrounded by the quiet peace of snow and silence and the promise of everything still to come. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at Charlotte's house with just family and close friends. Emma served as both flower girl and ring bearer, taking her duties with utmost seriousness. Sarah cried through the entire ceremony, and even Travis got a little misty-eyed during the vows. Ethan promised to love Charlotte through busy seasons and quiet moments, through stress and success, through all the complications that came with blending their lives. Charlotte promised to be patient with herself as she learned to be part of a family, to remember that perfection wasn't the goal but presence was, to choose love over fear every single day. They honeymooned in the mountains again, unable to resist returning to the place that held such significance for them. This time, they brought Emma, and the three of them hiked and explored and built memories together. One afternoon, they found themselves at the emergency shelter station where they'd been stranded, and Ethan and Charlotte walked to cabin 7, standing outside the small building that had changed everything. "Should we see if it's unlocked?" Charlotte asked with a mischievous smile. "Probably not appropriate with our daughter waiting in the car." "Fair point, but Ethan, I'm glad we got stranded here. Glad the universe put us in that impossible situation, because otherwise I might have spent the rest of my life being lonely and calling it success. And I might have spent the rest of mine being safe and calling it enough." They walked back to where Emma was waiting, her face pressed against the car window watching the snow, and Ethan felt a profound sense of rightness about everything. The storm had forced them together, but they'd chosen to stay together, to build something real and lasting from those uncertain beginnings. Life settled into its new rhythm after the wedding. Charlotte continued leading the company with the same brilliance she always had, but now she left work at reasonable hours, came home to family dinners, and learned to balance the professional drive that defined her with the personal connections that fulfilled her. Ethan's career flourished too, his projects earning recognition throughout the industry, his success entirely his own. Emma grew from 7 to 8 to 9, and Charlotte was there for all of it: school plays and science fairs, scraped knees and friendship drama, the 1,000 small moments that made up childhood. She learned to be a parent not by trying to be perfect, but by showing up consistently, by loving unconditionally, by being present even when she didn't have all the answers. 2 years after the wedding, Charlotte and Ethan found themselves back in the mountains one more time, this time without Emma, who was spending the weekend with Sarah. They'd booked the same cabin where they'd spent their honeymoon, wanting to mark their anniversary in the place that had become sacred to them. "Do you have any regrets?" Ethan asked one evening as they sat by the fire, the familiar crackle and warmth bringing back memories of that first desperate night. Charlotte thought about it seriously, the way she approached all important questions. "I regret all the years I wasted being afraid. Afraid to want more. Afraid to risk my carefully controlled life. Afraid to believe I deserved happiness outside of professional achievement." She turned to look at him. "But I don't regret a single moment since that storm. Every choice we've made, every challenge we've faced, every beautiful, ordinary day, I'd choose it all over again in a heartbeat. Even the chaos, the mess, the complete disruption of your organized life? Especially that. Because the chaos is life, Ethan, real life. And it's so much better than the perfect, lonely existence I had before." They made love slowly that night, not with the desperation of that first time in the emergency cabin, but with the deep certainty of two people who knew each other completely. Afterward, wrapped together under thick blankets while snow fell softly outside, Charlotte spoke into the darkness. "I never told you this, but that morning after the storm, when we had to go back to reality, I cried in my car before driving home." "Why?" "Because I was convinced that what we'd found couldn't survive outside that cabin, that the magic of it only existed in that extreme situation." She pressed closer to him. "I'm so glad I was wrong." "So am I." They fell asleep like that, holding each other the way they had so many times before, but with the weight of years and memories and a future still unfolding before them. In the morning, they woke to brilliant sunshine and decided to hike to the emergency shelter one more time. The paths were clearer now, marked and maintained, so different from that terrifying night when the world had disappeared in whiteout conditions. They stood outside cabin 7 again, and this time Charlotte tried the door. It was unlocked, and they stepped inside to find it exactly as they remembered. The single bed, the small kitchenette, the fireplace that had saved them from freezing. "I was so scared that night," Charlotte said softly, looking around the tiny space. "Of the storm, but more of what I was feeling. Of how much I wanted you even though I barely knew you. I was scared too, but sometimes the scary things are the ones most worth doing." Charlotte turned to him, her eyes bright with emotion. "Do you think we would have found each other without the storm, if we'd just met at the office, gone through normal life?" "I don't know. Maybe. I'd like to think we would have. But the storm gave us permission to be honest with each other in a way we might never have been otherwise." Ethan pulled her close. "It forced us to be vulnerable, to see each other without all the protective layers we wear in normal life. Then I'm grateful for it, for every terrifying moment of that night, because it brought me here, to this life, to you and Emma, and everything we've built together." They left the cabin hand in hand, walking back toward their car and the life waiting for them in Seattle. The mountains stood silent and magnificent around them, witness to where their story had begun and how far they'd come. That evening, back home in the house that had transformed from Charlotte's showplace to their family home, they sat down to dinner with Emma, who immediately launched into an elaborate story about the weekend with Aunt Sarah involving a science experiment gone slightly wrong. It was supposed to make a volcano, but instead it made this weird foam that got everywhere. "Aunt Sarah said words I'm not allowed to repeat," Emma reported with glee. Charlotte laughed, that real, unguarded laugh that Ethan had first heard in the cabin and never tired of hearing. "Well, at least you learned what not to do for your next science project. That's what Aunt Sarah said too, right before she made me help clean up the foam." After dinner, they had their traditional Friday movie night, the three of them piled on the couch with popcorn and blankets. Emma fell asleep halfway through, her head on Charlotte's lap, and Charlotte absently stroked her hair while the movie played on. Ethan looked at them, his daughter and his wife, his family, his home, and felt that same overwhelming gratitude that had become a constant companion. The storm had brought them together, but love had made them stay. Not the desperate need for warmth in the cold, but the steady, enduring warmth of choosing each other every single day. Charlotte met his eyes over Emma's sleeping form and smiled, that small private smile that was just for him, full of understanding and affection and the quiet certainty that they'd found exactly what they'd been missing without even knowing they were searching for it. Outside, Seattle rain fell steady and gentle against the windows, and inside, the family that had started in a blizzard found peace in the warmth they'd created together, not from necessity, but from choice. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to, every single day, for the rest of their lives. The storm had passed long ago, but the warmth that had sparked burned steady and true, lighting the way forward into a future neither of them had planned, but both had learned to embrace completely. And in the end, that was the greatest gift the blizzard had given them. Not just each other, but the courage to believe in something neither had thought possible, and the strength to build it into something real, lasting, and beautifully, perfectly theirs.